Chapter 1308. Outside the Hall of the Divine Generals, the most magnificent palace in the center belonged to the Master of the Elysium, Jianghu's hall. The Qi of heaven and earth there was the densest, even more than 10 times that of the other divine generals. Xue Wuli had cultivated there for a period of time before Chu Xiu attacked the Elysium, and his cultivation had improved greatly. Usually, other divine generals, except for Diwu Qisong, were not qualified to enter there. Only a divine general who had made great contributions could enter to cultivate. But now, Jianghu had led the other 9 divine generals to the outside world to fight. The door of the hall was not closed, and the core of the formation had been destroyed by him, which meant that Xue Wuli could enter at will. Stepping into the hall, Xue Wuli walked to the deepest part according to his memory, and saw the 9 soul lamps that represented the 9 divine generals. But 4 of them had been extinguished, except for Zhu Tianxiao. In such a short time, 3 more divine generals had been killed. Xue Wuli wanted to touch the soul lamp, but when he got close, he was repelled by the formation. There was a separate formation outside the soul lamp, but it was not for protection. It was to prevent accidents from happening when someone accidentally touched the soul lamp while cultivating. The soul lamps of the 9 divine generals were not Xue Wuli's target. He was going for Jianghu's soul lamp. Further in, there was a huge throne, gilded and shining with a sense of vicissitudes. Xue Wuli walked around the throne, and a golden soul lamp appeared in front of him. The flame on the soul lamp was even bigger than the other 9 soul lamps combined. In the past, when he was cultivating in the secret land of the Elysium, Xue Wuli had heard some senior divine generals talk about the secrets of the Elysium. The Master of the Elysium was very careful. Only when he had a very short time left in his life would he appoint the next successor of the Master of the Elysium and pass all the restrictions and inheritance to him. Therefore, it was easy to cause the new Master of the Elysium to lack prestige. It was recorded in the history of the Elysium that there had been rebellions by divine generals, but they had been suppressed. In one generation, due to the personal preferences of the previous leader of the Elysium, the successor that he appointed before his death was not the strongest among the 9 godly generals. As a result, there were people who were dissatisfied and joined forces with the other godly generals to start a rebellion. In the end, 8 of the 9 godly generals died in that generation, and only 1 godly general, who took over the position of the new sect master, survived. The reason why the Sky Gate sect master who had just taken over could control the life and death of the other god generals was because of this soul lamp. The sect master had also placed a portion of his soul in the lamp, but it was not to prevent him from escaping. Instead, it was to control the other 9 divine generals. So, if I destroy this soul lamp, what will the result be? Therefore, Xue Wuli began to attack the formation crazily. However, because this was a formation used to protect the sect leader's soul lamp, its sturdiness was beyond Xue Wuli's imagination. Clenching his teeth, Xue Wuli's eyes revealed a ruthless look. Since he had decided to pledge his allegiance to the Kunlun devil cult, he had to make sure that his pledge of allegiance was loud and clear. In an instant, Xue Wuli began to burn his blood essence, and a strong force penetrated the formation. Boundless blood light enveloped it, and with a loud bang, the formation was shattered. Mobilizing the last bit of his qi and blood, Xue Wuli turned it into a sharp blade and cut the soul lamp into pieces. In an instant, a strong wave of the primordial spirit spread throughout the entire hall, and Xue Wuli was hit so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. The primordial spirit power emitted from the soul lamp turned into Jianghu's face, and he looked at Xue Wuli with a ferocious expression. He shouted angrily, "Xue Wuli, you're courting death." That voice resounded in Xue Wuli's mind, causing his scalp to go numb. In an instant, his face was filled with fear. After all, Jianghu had been the Sky Gate sect master for so many years. Although Xue Wuli had become a traitor in the end, when he saw Jianghu appear before him, he still could not hide the fear in his heart. But fortunately, that was only the remnants of the primordial spirit power. After shouting that sentence, it dissipated. Xue Wuli sat where he was, spat out a mouthful of blood, and let out a long sigh. This proof of allegiance was enough, and the rest had nothing to do with him anymore. At that moment in the battlefield, as Jun Wuxian spat out blood and was seriously injured, everyone present felt a little confused, even the Celestial Master. But when Jun Wuxian spat out the words, "Shui Wu Li, you're courting death," Chu Xiu suddenly understood that Shui Wu Li must have made a move. To be honest, although Chu Xiu had instigated a traitor like Shui Wu Li, in reality, he really did not have high expectations for Shui Wu Li. One was because Chu Xiu was used to putting the biggest chance of winning on himself. Simply put, he did not trust Shui Wu Li that much. Also, Shui Wu Li was after all a newly advanced divine general, and he was certainly not too familiar with some of the secrets of the Sky Gate. Who would have thought that he would give Chu Xiu an unexpected surprise? Although he did not know what method he had used, he had still managed to injure Jun Wuxian. At that moment, Chu Xiu had already seized the opportunity. The formation breaker slashed down with his sword, but there was no trace of knife will. Endless demonic chi condensed in midair, and the next moment, the bright moon hung high in the sky. In the endless sharp light, Jun Wuxian's figure was illuminated. The clouds parted, the moon shone brightly, and the clear sky reflected the shadow. Feeling the power, Jun Wuxian's expression finally changed at that moment. This was already the third magic that Chu Xiu had displayed, and it was such a powerful magic that it made him tremble. Jun Wuxian could not care less about the pain in his primordial spirit, and he displayed the indestructible golden body to the extreme, trying to break free from the Celestial Master's chains of thunder and water. But at that moment, Wei Shuya and Yi Xiaonan, who had already reacted, attacked at the same time. Wei Shuya made a seal with his hands, and a thin line of fire condensed in his hands, entangling Jun Wuxian. The line of fire seemed to be only as thick as a hair, and even if one did not sense it carefully, one would not be able to detect it. But the power it contained seemed so amazing that it almost drained all of Wei Shuya's strength. This was the power of the rootless sacred fire. Because Wei Shuya had refined the supreme god elixir, there was a trace of the power of the rootless sacred fire in his body. Although it was only a trace, the power he condensed was the same as the rootless sacred fire. It was an incarnation of the rules of nature. That trace of fire easily cut the Sanskrit around Jun Wuxian's body and broke his indestructible golden body. At the same time, Yi Xiaonan's heaven-mending heart sutra was used to the extreme. Cracks appeared all over Jun Wuxian's body, and he was completely dragged in. He was strangled by the power of space, and the chains of thunder and water also penetrated into his body, causing Jun Wuxian to groan. With the three of them joining forces, Jun Wuxian was finally injured, and he lost his last chance to fight back. The clear sky illuminating shadow had already descended. The strong saber will penetrated Jun Wuxian's body, causing his physical body to be torn apart inch by inch, and a large amount of blood spurted out. In that instant, Jun Wuxian let out a long howl, his voice filled with endless pain and ferocity. The cracks spread all over his body, turning him into a bloody man. It was an abnormally terrifying sight. But even in such a state, Jun Wuxian displayed the 6 paths of pagoda disillusionment brilliance wheel once again, and smashed it at Wei Shuya. The clear sky illuminating shadow slash was a mystic skill that could not be defended against, and could only be resisted with the strength of one's physical body. But Jun Wuxian was the only person that Chu Xiu had ever seen who was able to continue to fight in such a state without forcing himself to hold on. Wei Shuya had not thought of this, and so he was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. Of course, even if he had reacted, it would have been useless. Condensing the power of the rootless sacred flame had already used up most of his physical strength. Turning around and forming a seal, Jun Wuxian used the blood that was flowing out of his body to condense a blood-red spear. The spear was burning with scarlet flames that could burn through the void. Fire dragon lights the lamp. Jun Wuxian, in such a heavily injured state, once again displayed his mystic skill. This time, the spear was aimed directly at Yi Xiaonan. Even Chu Xiu could not dodge the spear of the fire dragon lights the lamp. Even though Yi Xiaonan's Divine Mend Heart Sutra was extremely magical, it was useless against such an attack. The power that the Divine Mend Heart Sutra controlled was close to the use of the rules of space, but in the face of this spear, it was all extinguished. But at that moment, Yi Shaonan saw that he could not dodge it, so he pressed forward and formed a seal with one hand, as though he was mending the sky with one hand. Time and space were frozen in that instant. The spear tip of the fire dragon lights the lamp was imprisoned in the void, and as the seal fell, it was completely sealed. Only a mystic skill could resist a mystic skill. Yi Shaonan's divine men's seal was something he had already mastered when he was in the mysterious heaven and earth realm. Now that he had become a martial immortal, and under the pressure of the fire dragon lights the lamp, his cultivation technique had actually advanced into a mystic skill that belonged to Yi Shaonan himself. However, there were differences between mystic skills. How could the mystic skill that Yi Shaonan had comprehended after a temporary breakthrough compare to the fire dragon lights that had already been completed? Although he was expressionless, blood kept flowing down his right arm. His breathing was low, and it was obvious that his arm had been crippled. Jun Wushan's entire body trembled. He looked at Chu Xiu, whose strength had been drained by the clear sky reflecting shadow. His voice was as cold as a ghost's. "Is that all you've got? Do you really think this slash can destroy my physical body?" Jun Wushan's physical body was clearly on the verge of collapse, but it still had an extremely strong vitality. As his voice fell, the blood that flowed out of his body splashed outwards at an even faster speed, but it did not scatter. Instead, it gathered together, forming a blood man that was completely made of blood, and his physical body had already turned into ashes. When Lu Jianghu, who was fighting with the people of Heaven's Gate below, saw this scene, he could not help but exclaim, "F***CK. Heaven's Gate actually copied my cultivation technique. Shameless." Chapter 1309. Of course, Jun Wushan would not copy Lu Jianghu's cultivation method. Although the blood demon power technique was very magical, the Elysium had even more magical cultivation methods. Under the clear sky shadow, although Jun Wushan's physical body was not completely destroyed like Chu Xiu's other opponents, he had injured Wei Shuya and Yi Shaonan one after another, so he could no longer use it. However, he immediately discovered the weakness of the clear sky shadow, which was that it could not destroy one's primordial spirit. Jun Wushan had also cultivated primordial spirit's secret techniques before. He was now using his powerful primordial spirit to abandon his physical body and forcibly control his qi and blood. The majestic power of qi and blood rushed into the sky as Jun Wushan formed a seal with both hands. At this moment, 6 arms appeared on his blood-red body, which gave off the feeling of a Sanskrit cultivation method. However, the seal formed by his hands was the most authentic Taoist seal. It was an authentic Taoist seal that even the old celestial master felt ashamed of himself. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei destroyed the Elysium. Now Chu Xiu wants to do it again. Do you think you are Dugu Weiwei? The Elysium of today is no longer the Elysium of 500 years ago. The Kunlun devil cult of today is no longer the Kunlun devil cult of 500 years ago. A strange smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. "You are wrong. How do you know that I am not?" Before Jun Wushan could understand what Chu Xiu meant, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet in Chu Xiu's hand was already shining brightly. The 6 paths of reincarnation glowed with golden light. In the void, the powerful primordial spirit power shook the hearts of everyone present. The moment Jun Wushan saw the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, his expression finally changed. He shouted in shock, "It's you!" However, before Jun Wushan could finish speaking, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet directly pulled Jun Wushan's primordial spirit into it. At this moment, Jun Wushan finally understood why Chu Xiu dared to attack the Elysium at this time, and why Chu Xiu's strength had skyrocketed to such a terrifying level. It was all because of the Deluocean. The impact of the 6 paths of reincarnation illusion that he had suffered when the array went berserk was not an accident at all, but was deliberately done by Chu Xiu. Back at the exalted divine palace, Chu Xiu hadn't been able to bring out the 6 paths reincarnation bracelet's full power due to the distance. At this moment, he was using the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet face to face. Chu Xiu did not hesitate to use the full power of his primordial soul, allowing Jun Wushan to constantly be reincarnated in the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. Jun Wuxian's willpower was so strong that it could be said that he was the strongest martial artist that Chu Xiu had ever seen. He had reincarnated more than 20 times, but he was still able to persevere and maintain his state of mind. However, more than half of Chu Xiu's primordial soul power had been consumed. If this continued, both sides would still suffer. But at this time, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. The illusion in front of Jun Wuxian disappeared, and he was freed from the reincarnation. After more than 20 reincarnations, although Jun Wuxian could maintain his state of mind, his consciousness was still a little chaotic and blurry. But when he felt all this, Jun Wuxian laughed loudly. Chu Xiu, you can't hold on any longer, can you? It is your luck that you can come to the Daluocean, but you want to destroy the Elysium. This is your death sentence. 500 years ago, Dugu Weiwei failed to destroy the Elysium, and now it will be the same. Chu Xiu's figure appeared in front of Jun Wuxian, and he raised his eyebrows. Oh, is that so? 500 years ago, I let the Elysium go because I wanted you to continue guarding the passage between the higher and lower worlds. But now, I don't need you anymore. Is there still a need for you to exist? Jun Wuxian suddenly felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's tone. But the next moment, Chu Xiu's appearance suddenly changed. He became the person that the martial artists of the Elysium could not forget and feared the most. Dugu Weiwei. Impossible. You can't be Dugu Weiwei. At this moment, Jun Wuxian's state of mind was completely lost. Although he didn't dare to believe that the Chu Xiu in front of him was Dugu Weiwei, the charm in his appearance was exactly the same as the image left by the Elysium and the mark left by Dugu Weiwei in the past. Now, the Dugu Weiwei that Chu Xiu had outlined was based on the image of Heavenly Soul. Moreover, Tian Hun's image was exactly the same as Dugu Weiwei's. He had even managed to fool the people from the Celestial Daluo, let alone Jun Wuxian, who had only seen Dugu Weiwei's image in the imprint and image. Jun Wuxian's state of mind was extremely tough. He was proud and conceited. Of course, he had the capital to be so. Although Jun Wuxian's strength was unprecedented, he was at least ranked among the previous Elysium masters. In the entire Jianghu, besides Zhong Shenxiu, no one else was worthy of his attention. But the only one who could make him feel defeated and even fear was not Zhong Shenxiu, but Dugu Weiwei. The one who had left a mark and slapped away all his pride and conceit, causing him to completely lose his state of mind, was Dugu Weiwei. When he saw the scene in front of him, Jun Wuxian's state of mind was completely lost. In the 6 paths of reincarnation, it rotated crazily again. But this time, Jun Wuxian was unable to hold on. His spirit was completely torn apart by the endless reincarnation, and his true spirit was shattered. Until the last moment, there was only one person imprinted in Jun Wuxian's spirit, Dugu Weiwei. The blood man, which was supported by the power of Jun Wuxian's spirit, suddenly dissipated with a bang, turning into blood that flowed to the ground. Chu Xiu put away the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet. His face was as pale as a sheet. This battle was really very dangerous. If he had not thought of such a move to break Jun Wuxian's state of mind, it was estimated that in the end, he might have to fight to the point of exhausting his primordial spirit to be able to completely defeat Jun Wuxian. Old Celestial Master sighed and patted his chest. Oh my, this is the last time I will fight in a battle like this. If I do it again, I'm afraid I will die prematurely. On the other side, although Qinqing Di and Yi Xiaonan were both injured, their eyes were filled with fighting spirit, and they even felt that they had not lost out. What these two people pursued was the extreme of power. Fighting with an expert like Jun Wuxian could be said to have benefited them greatly. Wei Xia walked over and asked, "Are you all right? Is Jun Wuxian dead?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I'm fine. I just used up too much power. Jun Wuxian is completely dead. His true spirit has been destroyed in the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet." Rama's true spirit had been rescued during the destruction of the Sabodhi Zen monastery. From then on, Chu Xiu had become more cautious. Most warriors would die if their physical bodies were destroyed. However, there were some warriors who were special. Their spirit might be abnormal and could preserve their true spirit. Therefore, when Chu Xiu killed people, he first targeted the physical body, and secondly, he targeted the primordial spirit and true spirit. Moreover, after obtaining the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, Chu Xiu basically did not have to worry about this. With the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, he could completely destroy any spirit or true spirit. Throwing a handful of elixirs into his mouth, Chu Xiu stared ahead and said in a deep voice, "Attack the gate of heaven. Kill all the heavenly generals of heaven. Leave no one alive." These heavenly generals of the Elysium were all brainwashed by Jun Wuxian. Other than Shui Wuli, who was a newly promoted heavenly general, the rest of them saw Jun Wuxian as a god. Even if they wanted to surrender, Chu Xiu would not dare to do so. Actually, there was no need for Chu Xiu to say it. Lu Jianghu and the others had already led the people of the major sects to attack the gate of heaven. However, the people of Heaven's Gate were rather strong-willed. Among the 9 heavenly generals, for example, Diwu Qisong and Lin Songlong, even though they knew that Jun Wuxian was dead, they exploded with even more power and began to fight with their lives. Unfortunately, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands. They were directly surrounded and killed. Shang Tianyong led the people into the gate of heaven and went straight to Jun Wuxian's hall in the center. Opening the door, he saw Shui Wuli, who was lying on the ground recovering his strength. Shang Tianyong laughed coldly and said, "Oh, there's still a survivor of Heaven's Gate hiding here. Fine, I will send you on your way today to accompany your gate master." Shui Wuli was shocked and quickly shouted, "We're on the same side. We're on the same side. We're Cult Master Chu's spies in the Gate of Heaven. Kunlun's holy sect, thousands of years. Unify the pugilistic world and dominate the world. Cult Master Chu's divine might is unparalleled and awe-inspiring in the pugilistic world." Shui Wuli was so scared that he started to recite a series of sentences. The other warriors of the Kunlun devil cult were all blushing. He was also extremely afraid. He had done so much, and it was not easy for him to endure until the heavenly gates were destroyed. It was time for him to be rewarded according to his contributions, but in the end he had been mistakenly killed by his own people. He would die with grievance even if he died. At this time, Lu Jianghu walked in. Shui Wuli recognized him. It was Lu Jianghu who had placed the blood god seal on Shui Wuli. Therefore, Shui Wuli immediately said, "Demon Lord Lu, quickly prove to me that I'm really on the same side." When Shui Wuli called out to Demon Lord Lu, Lu Jianghu beamed with joy. He said to Shang Tianliang and the others, "Don't be so nervous. This kid is on the same side. We were able to break through the gate of heaven thanks to this kid being a snitch. No, a spy." Hearing this, Shang Tianliang waved his hand and asked someone to help Shui Wuli up and take him away for treatment. When the gate of heaven had been completely broken through and everyone had been cleaned up, Chu Xiu, who had recovered his strength, officially stepped into the gate of heaven. Although the other sects did not leave at this time, they did not tactlessly fight with the Kunlun devil cult for the treasures of the gate of heaven. The moon-worshipping cult and the Taoist master mansion had discussed this in advance. Moreover, in this battle, Chu Xiu had indeed contributed the most. The others had also seen the strength of the Kunlun devil cult, so naturally, they did not dare to fight with the Kunlun devil cult. Seeing that the top sects like the moon-worshipping cult and the Taoist master mansion had given up on the idea of fighting with the Kunlun devil cult, the other sects naturally did not dare to act recklessly. After entering the gate of heaven, Chu Xiu did not first look at the various treasures of the gate of heaven. Instead, he went to the deepest part of the gate of heaven, to the center of the 10 sealing formations. The things there were the most important, and also what Chu Xiu wanted the most. There was a yang source of the upper mortal realms sealed there. Chapter 1310. Origin was something that Chu Xiu had learned from Tianhun. Although Chu Xiu could not completely believe everything that Tianhun had said regarding the origin, Tianhun should not have lied to Chu Xiu. Now, the devil qi in Chu Xiu's body should be the devil origin that had descended to the mortal world. Although this devil origin usually did not show itself, it had helped Chu Xiu a lot at critical moments. However, now that Chu Xiu's strength was not enough, he could not mobilize it at all. He also did not know how to mobilize the power of the devil origin. Now that another yang origin was about to be in his hands, What would it bring to Chu Xiu? At this time, Xue Wuli was following behind Chu Xiu. With an extremely obedient look, he told him everything that he had done in the Gate of Heaven. He was a smart person. At this time, he did not exaggerate or show off his achievements. As long as he did what he deserved, even if Chu Xiu wanted to buy people's hearts, he would still give him what he deserved. Hearing this, Chu Xiu nodded with satisfaction and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, I promised you a hall leader position before, so I will definitely not go back on my word. In the future, you can establish an independent hall in the Holy Church. All the surrendered disciples in the Gate of Heaven can be under your command. In the Holy Church, I will also give you a portion to help you stabilize your position. You should know about the Daluotian matters. In the future, I will also bring you to the Daluotian and give you resources to help you enter the mysterious heaven and earth realm as soon as possible." Hearing this, Xue Wuli was immediately overjoyed. He bowed deeply to Chu Xiu and said, "Your subordinate thanks you for your guidance. I wish you a long life and unify the Jianghu." Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, "Forget it, the Holy Church does not care about this. As long as you do your job well, it is more important than anything else." Although Xue Wuli's flattery made people feel relaxed and happy, they would get tired of it after listening to it for too long. Xue Wuli nodded and pointed to a stone wall that was engraved with all kinds of runes. "Leader, this is the center of the Gate of Heaven's sealing formation." Chu Xiu nodded and let Xue Wuli leave first, while he carefully looked around. The shape of this stone wall was very peculiar. It was shaped like an arch, and it was densely engraved with runes. In truth, this was the true form of the gate. The other 10 formations, as well as the ones on the exalted divine palace's side, were used to seal the gate. 10,000 years ago, the cultivators of the lower realms had entered the Daluotian continent through this place, and this was where the extreme yang source was sealed. Chu Xiu took a deep breath. Without the slightest hesitation, Gang Qi erupted from the formation-breaking tool in his hand to the extreme, affecting the surrounding laws of heaven and earth. It transformed into a giant blade that was hundreds of meters long and slashed at the stone wall. With a loud explosion, the entire stone wall suddenly emitted a dazzling golden light, and a part of the runes shattered. But it was only a part, and the entire stone wall was still extremely stable. As Chu Xiu's blade fell, the runes became fewer and fewer, and the stone wall began to tremble. Even the sealing formations in the 10 halls of the Gate of Heaven began to crack. When Chu Xiu's final slash landed, the 10 formations completely exploded. At the same time, cracks started to appear on the stone walls. In an instant, a wave of extremely dense energy of the universe surged out from the cracks and rushed towards them. It was a familiar aura, an aura that belonged to the exalted divine palace. At this time, Yi Xiaonan and the others, as well as the other martial artists, were waiting at the foot of Kunlun. The reason why they hadn't left was simple: they were waiting for Chu Xiu's promise. If it was true, then the Kunlun devil cult could eat the meat, and they could drink the soup, then everything would be fine. If Chu Xiu had really lied to them this time, then even if the Kunlun devil cult really had the capital to dominate the world, they would not sit still and wait for death. After all, the Kunlun devil cult had already become so powerful 500 years ago, and yet there were still people who dared to resist. In the instant that Chu Xiu broke through the heavenly gate, the powerful energy completely enveloped them, causing their expressions to change. They were both surprised and overjoyed. They had never seen such a level of qi of heaven and earth in any secret land or treasure land. What Chu Xiu said was true. Of course, this was only on Kunlun Mountain, next to the Gate of Heaven, so the qi of heaven and earth they felt was very rich. If it were spread throughout the martial arts world, it would not be so obvious, but it was enough to raise the level of qi in the martial arts world by a level. At this time, Chu Xiu's attention was not on the raging qi of heaven and earth, but on the crack in the center of the stone wall, where a golden light had emerged. The golden light was very faint and inconspicuous, as if the power of the broken runes had not been completely consumed. In fact, Chu Xiu did not even notice it at first. What really made Chu Xiu lock onto it was that the moment it appeared, the source of demonic path in Chu Xiu's body, which was silent most of the time, suddenly moved slightly, as if attracted by the other party. Chu Xiu carefully drove his gang qi, wanting to hold it in his hand. But who would have thought that the source of yang was not difficult to capture? When Chu Xiu's gang qi fell on it, it instantly escaped into Chu Xiu's body, so that Chu Xiu did not even have a chance to defend himself. This moment also scared Chu Xiu. He was going to study this thing first, but who would have thought that it would directly escape into his body, not giving him a chance at all? At this time, there were both the source of yang and the source of demonic path in Chu Xiu's body. These two sources in Chu Xiu's dantian were attracting each other, head and tail connected, like a Tai Chi yin and yang fish, rotating in an unusually harmonious and accurate cycle. Even when the two sources were different in color, their positions were exactly the same, so accurate that it was as if they were made by heaven. Furthermore, at the instant when the two source energies merged and revolved, the collision of the two brought forth a trace of energy ripple. It was just a tiny energy ripple, but it filled Chu Xiu's body in an instant, causing all the power in his body to explode abruptly. Chu Xiu groaned in pain in an instant. The next moment, with absolute willpower, Chu Xiu controlled his body to forcibly refine the energy. In fact, cracks even appeared on the skin around him, making him look like a person made of blood. It was an extremely terrifying scene. Chu Xiu had not expected that he would be able to fight against Jun Wuxian and kill him only because he had exhausted too much of his energy. But in this place, he would actually be seriously injured. Fortunately, to the two source energies, the energy ripple was only a trace that was unconsciously released. As such, Chu Xiu was still able to suppress it. After he completely suppressed the energy ripple, he discovered that his cultivation had skyrocketed to the third heavenly layer martial immortal. That stunned Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had experienced many breakthroughs in cultivation, it was the first time he had made such a baffling breakthrough. The power of the extreme yin source energies and the extreme yang source energies was simply terrifying. Just the trace of extremely weak energy that leaked out when the two source energies merged allowed him to step into the next heavenly layer. According to what Tianhun had said, the gathering of three source energies of the same attribute might really be able to open the legendary longevity heaven. Although the two source energies were in his body, Chu Xiu did not know whether they were good or bad. He could not use them for the time being. However, it was a treasure among treasures. Even if he could not use it, he still had to get his hands on it first. At that moment, in the instant that Chu Xiu shattered the heavenly gate and obtained the extreme yang source energies, a violent tremor came from the exalted divine palace. However, the tremor was only contained within the central prefecture. Only those who stood at the peak of the Daluotian continent could sense it. In an instant, several halos of light appeared in the sky above the exalted divine palace's formation. They were not physical objects. Even experts at the ninth heavenly layer of martial immortal could not instantly traverse a region and arrive at the exalted divine palace. This was merely a means of communication that they had constructed when they were building the formation. A dignified and solemn voice came from one of the halos that was filled with dazzling Buddhist light. The formation of the lower realm has been damaged. Something must have happened to the gatekeepers we left in the lower realm. In another halos of light, the color of primal chaos stirred. A voice that was difficult to distinguish whether it was a man or a woman spoke with a hint of mockery. Something happened? Thousands of years ago, when we completely lost contact with them, they were already in trouble. Starlight sparkled in another halos of light as a gentle voice spoke. Everyone arguing about this is useless. The formation of the lower realm has been destroyed, which means that the formation in the exalted divine palace won't be able to hold out for much longer. After some time, we will be able to reconnect the passage to the lower realm. Is everyone ready for this? Or should we reinforce the formation and maintain its original state? The voice in the Buddhist light spoke again, this time with a sigh. Perhaps this is fate. We made a mistake 10,000 years ago. The Daluotian is not a place that belongs to us. We should have faced our tribulations in the lower realm. After the tribulation, we will naturally be reborn. We forcefully broke through the Daluotian barrier, slaughtered the natives, and occupied this world that does not belong to us. We have violated the karma of the heavenly Tao. This is our original sin. When that person appeared from the lower realm 500 years ago, countless Daluotian experts died. Perhaps this is the punishment that the heavens have bestowed upon us. Now, there are already secret realms that have begun to wither and decline. The tribulation of heaven and earth has never passed. The tribulation is not aimed at heaven and earth, but at us. Today, the formation of the lower realm has been broken and the passage between the two realms has reopened. Perhaps this is the guidance of the heavens for us to return to where we came from and leave this world that does not belong to us. The androgynous voice became even more shrill and mocking. Hypocrites! If you are so unyielding, why did you move the heavenly Tao to the Daluotian? You know that this is the original sin, but in the western regions, you showed no mercy when you slaughtered the barbarians. The karma of the heavenly Tao? I am the heavenly Tao, I am karma. An even more dignified voice came from the Buddhist light. Heretic demons, how dare you speak of the karma of the heavenly Tao? As the anger between the two grew stronger and stronger, the Tao master's old but sonorous voice suddenly descended. Enough. Chapter 1311. Although Taoist Jianghu wasn't known as the Daluotian's #1 Daluotian, his prestige was still there. Everyone fell silent as soon as he spoke. Jianghu, what do you think? The gentle voice rang out again from within the circle of sparkling starlight. There's no point in arguing here, because we have no idea what's going on in the lower realm. Is there a problem with the people, or is there a problem with the formation? My suggestion is to let nature take its course. You have poured so much effort into the exalted divine palace, and I'm sure none of you are willing to see it destroyed now. So whether we descend to the lower realms or not, when the formation's power is completely exhausted and it naturally disintegrates, we will be able to descend while preserving the exalted divine palace. But in the meantime, we should make preparations. Even if we descend to the lower realms, we must still prepare the heaven stone. According to the ancestors, when we first came to the Daluotian, we lost many of our companions because we didn't have enough heaven stone. Those people are still buried in Central Province. After a long while, Taoist Jianghu nodded. I agree with Jianghu's suggestion. There was no response from the other circles of light, but they didn't object either. It seemed that they were in favor of the idea as well. Taoist Jianghu nodded. If that's the case, then let's all disperse. As the light faded, the exalted divine palace regained its calm. Chu Xiu didn't know that his actions had alarmed the Daluotian higher-ups. But now that the formation was destroyed, especially without the suppression of the Yang source, the passage between the lower and lower realms would soon be completely destroyed, so Chu Xiu had to make preparations. Once outside, Chu Xiu asked Mei Qinglian, who was waiting outside, have the other sects left? Mei Qinglian nodded. After realizing that we weren't deceiving them, they all dispersed. Chu Xiu nodded and called Xue Wuli over. Take me to the sutra depository of the Gate of Heaven. Elder Wei and the rest should come too. Let's see if there's anything valuable. From Chu Xiu's point of view, the most valuable thing in the entire Elysium, apart from the Yang ability source, was the Elysium's treasured cultivation technique. Although the Elysium had been left behind by the Daluotian in the lower world, they were not abandoned by the Daluotian. Instead, they were the true loyal subordinates of the Daluotian sections. They risked their lives to defend the lower world's formation. Therefore, the cultivation techniques they possessed were the core inheritance secret arts of the Daluotian powers. They were extremely precious. Just look at Jun Wuxian, the clan master. Apart from Dugu Weiwei's inheritance, Chu Xiu's other cultivation techniques were obtained by himself through various means or by killing others. That was why he was able to gather all three branches of Taoism, Buddhism, and Demon. However, Jun Wuxian had only relied on the inheritance of the Elysium to control all the cultivation techniques of the three sections. There were even some extremely powerful magical powers. This was enough to prove the richness of the Elysium's collection. After Xue Wuli brought Chu Xiu into the sutra depository of the Elysium, Chu Xiu allowed them to search freely. At the same time, Chu Xiu was also searching. In fact, he had long been interested in the two cultivation techniques that Jun Wushan possessed. One was the indestructible golden body, and the other was his 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. The indestructible golden body was the most powerful magical power of the heavenly Luo treasure Buddha. Its power was naturally amazing. However, Chu Xiu did not intend to cultivate it completely. Instead, he had a bold idea. The same was true for the 6 paths of Buddha disillusionment wheel. Chu Xiu did not even want to walk the path that Dugu Weiwei had walked in the past. How could he walk the path of Jun Wushan, a defeated opponent? He only wanted to combine it with his 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet to create a new and powerful cultivation technique. After obtaining the cultivation technique that he had chosen, Chu Xiu immediately entered into a state of seclusion. At the same time, he allowed the others to choose their own cultivation techniques to cultivate. In the Elysium's seclusion chamber, Chu Xiu held the secret manual of the indestructible golden body and deeply imprinted every word in it into his mind. The reason why Chu Xiu wanted the indestructible golden body was very simple. He wanted to merge the indestructible golden body with the 9 heavens demonic golden body. These two cultivation techniques, one Buddhist and the other demonic, seemed to others to be playing with fire. However, Chu Xiu had been cultivating both Buddhism and demonic for a long time, so he did not have to worry about this at all. The sudden emergence of this idea was also the inspiration brought to Chu Xiu by the fusion of the demonic Wei and the Yang ability origin. Righteous, demonic Yin and Yang were twins. Although they repelled each other, as long as they were used well, they would be able to achieve a delicate balance, just like these two origins. Chu Xiu had the same idea. It was not difficult to cultivate the indestructible golden body, and Chu Xiu did not intend to push it to the same level as Jun Wushan, which was comparable to the divine powers. The difficult part was how to master a delicate balance between the two cultivation techniques. It took more than 20 days for Chu Xiu to finally master the balance. At this time, Chu Xiu was surrounded by golden Sanskrit and pitch-black demonic qi at the same time. The Sanskrit appeared on the golden body, but the deep demonic qi turned into armor, lingering around his body. The two forces repelled each other, but also depended on each other to achieve a balance. Letting out a long breath, Chu Xiu dispelled this state. At this time, there was no opponent, and he could not estimate to what extent his strength and defense could reach in this state. This kind of thing still needed to be practiced in actual combat. But now that these two cultivation techniques were merged together, it was not appropriate to use the previous name. Chu Xiu thought about it and named it the Holy Demon Indestructible Body. Now, Chu Xiu had not yet deduced it to a perfect state, but after the fusion of the 9 heavens demonic golden body of the ancient demon god Lu Wenhou and the indestructible golden body of Tian Luo Baosha, it might really reach the state of indestructible when it reached the extreme peak. After he was done with this cultivation technique, Chu Xiu opened the second cultivation technique that he had chosen. The second cultivation technique that Chu Xiu chose was actually not the 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel, but the origin of the 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel, which was also the secret technique of Tian Luo Baosha, the 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel. The 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel was an extension of the 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel, and it was an exclusive martial skill that carried his strong martial arts imprint. Of course, Chu Xiu would not walk the same path as Jun Wushan, so he had to look at the source. The 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Wheel was a part of the scripture, which mainly explained the concept of the 6 paths of reincarnation, followed by the cultivation technique, which was to materialize the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The Hell Tao was sinister and vicious, the Animal Tao was fierce and violent, the Azura Tao was murderous and evil, the Hungry Ghost Tao was evil and strange, the Celestial Tao was mighty, and the Human Tao was the most bizarre, which was to eliminate all kinds of strange powers. This cultivation technique was very strange, and Chu Xiu had never heard of it in the Daluotian. Although Chu Xiu was not a Buddhist, and most of the Buddhists wanted to eat him alive, Chu Xiu had cultivated many Buddhist cultivation techniques. He even dared to say that even if the remaining Buddhists from the Great Light Temple and Subodhi Monastery came, their attainments in Buddhist cultivation techniques would not be as good as Chu Xiu. In the eyes of the orthodox Buddhist warriors, the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation was simply rebellious to the extreme, and could even be said to be the heresy of heresy. It showed the ugly power of the 6 paths of reincarnation directly in front of you. Cultivating a few of the powers was no different from rebelling, but it was very much in line with Chu Xiu's appetite. The path that Jun Wuxian took was to put his state of mind into the 6 paths of reincarnation to temper himself, feel the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and then control them, turning them into one, and strangling any existence. This was the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation. After Chu Xiu read the 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation, his path was exactly the opposite of Jun Wuxian's. The 6 paths of reincarnation itself was a whole. Why should it be combined? When all kinds of powers were added together, it would be the real power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. Especially with the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet, he could perfectly control the charm of the 6 paths of reincarnation. This time, it took Chu Xiu 2 months to figure out the general idea of the cultivation method. At this time, around Chu Xiu, the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet shone brightly, and golden Buddha light formed a complete 6 paths of reincarnation around him. The power of the 6 paths of reincarnation continued to probe out, and the power of various attributes intertwined back and forth, sometimes combining, but reaching a strange balance. Even at this time, if there was someone in the 6 paths of reincarnation, as long as the other party was really attacked by the 6 paths of reincarnation, their own primordial spirit would be damaged according to the various characteristics of the 6 paths of reincarnation. It could be said that it was a secret technique of the primordial spirit and the body, a double attack, which was stronger and more unpredictable than Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of reincarnation. Chu Xiu also discovered that ever since he merged the extreme yang source and the devil source in his body, he seemed to have comprehended something, but it also seemed that he did not comprehend anything. Instead, he subconsciously pursued a kind of balance. Previously, Tianhun had told him not to follow the old path of Dugu Weiwei, but Chu Xiu had no clue. Now, he finally understood that he had actually embarked on a different path from Dugu Weiwei. After successfully deriving this cultivation method, Chu Xiu scratched his head. He still had to give this cultivation method a name. Chu Xiu was very satisfied with the power of this cultivation method. At present, he had only succeeded in the initial derivation, but in fact, it was already not inferior to the power of Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of reincarnation wheel of reincarnation. When it was developed to the extreme, it could even surpass some of the spells, so this name was very important. Based on the basic principle that the longer the name, the stronger it was. After thinking for a while, Chu Xiu finally named it 6 paths of Saha Wondrous Splendor Wheel of Reincarnation. Saha represented the boundless world, and in the evolution of the 6 paths of reincarnation, it actually contained the various powers of the boundless world. In addition to these 2 Buddhist cultivation methods, Chu Xiu also chose a secret ancient book of Taoism, the Taixin Scripture. The Taixin Scripture was a secret ancient book of the 3 Pristines Temple. It did not have any offensive martial arts skills, but it was the simplest of the great Tao, pointing directly to the origin of heaven and earth. Taoism cultivation methods were the most gentle, and they sought a subtle balance among the rules of all things. It was just like the 2 origins in Chu Xiu's body. Therefore, after seeing the Taixin Scripture, Chu Xiu casually flipped through it, and almost without hesitation, he decided to make it one of the main cultivation methods. Chapter 13:12. Chu Xiu chose 2 Buddhist techniques and 1 Taoist technique from the Gate of Heaven. In fact, there were quite a number of demonic techniques in the Gate of Heaven, but Chu Xiu wasn't interested in any of them. Most of his demonic techniques came from Dugu Weiwei. How could he be interested in other demonic techniques? Moreover, Chu Xiu had the demonic path of creation. It was a powerful demonic technique that could lead to the great Tao. At least, in terms of demonic techniques, Chu Xiu wasn't lacking. As for the techniques in the Gate of Heaven, after Wei Shia and the others sorted them out, there were 11 of them. It should be known that they were techniques. The appearance of every technique meant that the ancestor of the technique was a powerful martial immortal. While martial immortals were capable of creating divine abilities, not every martial immortal was capable of creating divine abilities. Chu Xiu had asked Lu Sanjin before. There were only 5 or 6 techniques in the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion. The collection of the Gate of Heaven had already surpassed that of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, Chu Xiu had already flipped through those sacred arts, but he did not choose a single one. The technique that Chu Xiu had, the cross-shaped lotus seal, consumed little energy, but it had strong limitations. It specialized in suppressing evil and strange powers. The phenomenon of heaven and earth was the pinnacle of power. Chu Xiu was most familiar with it and could change it at will. The clear sky illuminating shadow was powerful, but it consumed a shocking amount of energy as well. It had to be used cautiously and it depended on the occasion. Now that he had learned all the techniques from weak to strong, there wasn't much meaning for Chu Xiu to waste his energy to comprehend the other techniques. For example, the fire dragon lamp that Jun Wuxian had unleashed was very powerful, but it might not be stronger than Chu Xiu's phenomenon of heaven and earth. The techniques in the Gate of Heaven were basically at the same level as Jun Wuxian's fire dragon lamp. So, even if he successfully cultivated it, it wouldn't be of much use to Chu Xiu. The only thing that interested Chu Xiu was the head-piercing 7 arrows that Jun Wuxian had used on him. This divine ability was strange, vicious, and incomparably poisonous. It could be said to be very interesting. Chu Xiu had once tried to cultivate it, but he found that he couldn't fit this divine power at all. It was useless to forcefully cultivate it. Divine powers were not cultivation techniques. Even if a cultivation technique was not compatible with you, as long as you wanted to learn it, you would be able to learn the basics. However, if the divine ability was not compatible with you, then you didn't know how to use it. There was no such thing as entry or great accomplishment. However, Chu Xiu didn't care about it. It was normal for a straightforward person like him to not be compatible with the sinister and vicious magical power of the 7 nailhead arrows. Shang Tianliang and the others had also gained quite a lot. There were too many cultivation techniques and martial arts techniques in the heavenly gates. There were countless body refinement techniques of the Taoist, Buddhist, and demonic sections. Almost everyone had gained something. Therefore, the group of people from the Kunlun devil cult occupied the basilica that used to belong to the divine generals of Elysium and began to prepare to train in seclusion. Chu Xiu was also preparing to go into seclusion for a period of time. His breakthrough to the 3rd heavenly layer of martial immortal was a bit inexplicable. He was not prepared at all. It would inevitably cause his cultivation to become unstable. So, he needed to go into seclusion for a period of time to stabilize his cultivation. However, before Chu Xiu went into seclusion, Grandmaster Yuan Ji sent news that someone from the Daluotian side was looking for him. It was the Vice Palace Master of the Southern Region's Heavenly Demon Palace, Yuan Kongqing. He seemed to be very anxious. Chu Xiu and Yuan Kongqing had cooperated to annihilate the blissful Demon Palace. Now, the Heavenly Demon Palace was the #1 demonic sect in the southern region. The cooperation between the two sides was quite good. So, Yuan Kongqing was probably not looking for trouble. Chu Xiu had no choice but to temporarily put aside his seclusion and return to the southern barbaric land. Then, through the formation of the southern barbaric land, he returned to the Daluotian side. Stepping into the reception hall of the Chang'an mansion, Chu Xiu said with a smile on his face, "Palace Lord Yuan, you have graced us with your presence. I was in closed-door cultivation and was unable to welcome you in time. I hope Palace Lord Yuan will not take offense." Yuan Kongqing said with a strange expression, "Official Chu, you can still smile? During this period of time, did you really not hear the slightest news?" Chu Xiu said in surprise, "What's wrong? Did something happen?" Since the end of the Daluotian Divine Palace, Chu Xiu had focused all his energy on the lower realms. After all, after seriously injuring Jun Wuxian, Chu Xiu must use the fastest time to deal with the Gate of Heaven. Otherwise, when Jun Wuxian recovered from his injuries, this rare opportunity would be wasted. So, on the Daluotian side, Chu Xiu really didn't pay any special attention. Yuan Kongqing said in a deep voice, "Official Chu, I have heard of your performance in the Daluotian Divine Palace. It is indeed very dazzling. Using the profound principles of heaven and earth to kill Xen Jialua, who had stepped into the martial immortal realm. This kind of achievement is almost as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns in 10,000 years. In the rankings of the Daluotian Divine Palace, you are one of the 6 strongest people, on par with the geniuses of the 3 Pristines Temple, Su Gushan, and the others. You crossed the gap between heaven and man with 1 step and entered the martial immortal realm. It can be said that your performance in the Daluotian Divine Palace is definitely the most outstanding of all the cultivators who entered the Daluotian Divine Palace. But, did you not think about how many people you have offended in this line of work? You forced a disciple of the world's sword sects to cripple an arm and humiliated them. You even killed Venerable Guyu, Divine General Zhenlong, and exalted swordsman Ling Tian. You should know that it is not easy for Venerable Guyu to cultivate a successor, but you, in the end, killed all of them. Although my description is a little inappropriate, what you did is no different from ending their line of descendants. And in the Sanskrit temple, Xen Jialua is the new temple master of the Vishnu temple, a person with a limitless future. Originally, the Sanskrit temple planned to let him step into the 3rd heavenly layer of martial immortal realm in the Daluotian, and then after returning to the Sanskrit temple, undergo the 3 gods' empowerment, he would immediately rise by another 3rd heavenly layer and stabilize the situation in the Vishnu temple. Weren't you at the 2nd heavenly layer when you came out of the Daluotian Divine Palace? How come you are at the 3rd heavenly layer now? Forget it, let's not talk about you. The Sanskrit temple planned well, but in the end, you killed them without even giving them a chance to enter the Daluotian Divine Palace. How can the Sanskrit temple let it go? You should know to leave a way out, and it will be easier to meet them in the future. You have done so ruthlessly, how can the others not react? This time, I have already received the news that led by the World Sword Sects, Divine General Zhenlong, Su Tianya, Venerable Guyu, Fang Baidu, and exalted swordsman Ling Tian, Xing Juyan are all coming to find trouble with you, and among them, the Sanskrit temple may also send people. Official Chu, the last time you cooperated with the demonic palace, you and I have some friendship, so I came to remind you this time. Chu Xiu slightly raised his eyebrows and cupped his hands at Yuan Kongqing, saying, "Thank you for the reminder, Palace Master Yuan. I know the principle of leaving a way out, but I want to leave a way out, but they did not think of leaving a way out. Moreover, the Central Plains is a trap, so it is normal for them to die, isn't it? They were killed because they were inferior to me, but now they still have the face to find trouble with me. These so-called famous prime sovereigns are all losers. Right, it is very common for prime sovereign successors to be killed when they travel the pugilistic world. Aren't these 3 breaking the rules by coming to find trouble with me now?" Yuan Kongqing smiled bitterly. Rules are just a tacit unspoken rule, and no one will care even if they are a little flexible. Sheng Juyuan and the other 2 will naturally not come to find trouble with you openly, but if the world's sword sects invite them to help, then there will be no problem. Before I came, the world's sword sects were already discussing this matter, and I was delayed for a few days on the road, so I'm afraid they are already here. In short, Official Chu, you should be prepared for this matter. I will take my leave first. After all, I am also a member of the Southern Region sects, and it is not good for others to see me here." Yuan Kongqing left in a hurry, but what puzzled him was that there did not seem to be any fear or worry on Chu Xiu's face. One must know that he was currently being targeted by the world's sword sects, several martial immortals, and even the Sanskrit sect. The Imperial Sky Pavilion alone could not protect him, so why did he look so fearless? Yuan Kongqing did not ask much. He was here to bring a message to Chu Xiu out of an opportunistic reason. He had only worked with Chu Xiu once, and did not have much of a relationship. As they were both from the Southern Region sects, they must have planted spies in each other's sections. The world's sword sects discussions were not too secretive, so it was normal for Yuan Kongqing to know. Therefore, he could say or not say anything about this matter. However, Yuan Kongqing always had a feeling that the height that Chu Xiu could reach in the future might be beyond his imagination. When Chu Xiu was still in the heaven and earth elucidation state, Yuan Kongqing could not see through him, and it was even more so now. Therefore, he wanted to inform Chu Xiu and form a good relationship with him. In the future, if Chu Xiu died, he would not suffer any loss, but if Chu Xiu survived, he would owe him a favor. After Yuan Kongqing left, Lu Jianghe and Mei Qinglian walked in. Chu Xiu said in surprise, "You two did not go into seclusion?" Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "The Red Lotus Hellfire of the Red Lotus is enough for me to study, so I only chose 2 ordinary secret techniques that are the icing on the cake, so there is no need for me to go into seclusion. When I heard that the Daluotian is in trouble, I came to see if there is anything I can help with." Lu Jianghe nodded and said, "Me too." Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "It's not a big deal, it's nothing more than someone who is unwilling to lose and came looking for trouble. I have already expected this. Old Lu, come with me to High Heaven Sect. Qinglian, you stay and guard the Daluotian side. While you are at it, tell the barbarians to report immediately if they see any Southern Territory cultivators coming." Chu Xiu wasn't surprised by Yuan Kongqing's words. In fact, he was already prepared for it. He had always been accustomed to speculating about others with the greatest malice. He had killed so many people in the Daluotian territory, so there was no guarantee that someone would come looking for trouble with him. As for the rule that Gu Zun could not act, Chu Xiu actually did not believe it, because among the Daluotian, there were basically no rules that could restrain martial immortal masters. It was just that Chu Xiu did not expect that this group of people would come together to find trouble with him. Chu Xiu's countermeasure was also very simple. He had spent so much effort to save Fang Yinglong last time, and it was not in vain. Now, it was his High Heaven Sect's turn to return this favor. Chapter 1313. The atmosphere in High Heaven Sect's High Heaven City was somewhat depressing. When Chu Xiu arrived, Elder Wu of High Heaven Sect came out to greet him. Seeing the cultivators of High Heaven Sect like this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but ask curiously, "Why do I feel that the atmosphere in your High Heaven Sect is a bit off?" Elder Wu looked at Chu Xiu curiously and said, "Shenyuan Wushuang was killed by a demonic ghost in the Exalted Divine Palace. Official Chu, you should know about this." Hearing Elder Wu's words, Chu Xiu finally realized that it was because of Shenyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu had really forgotten about this matter. It wasn't that Chu Xiu's memory was bad, but when he killed Shenyuan Wushuang, the latter was no longer a threat in Chu Xiu's eyes. Killing him was as easy as stepping on an ant. Chu Xiu could remember Jun Wuxian, who had almost killed him in the past, but he had subconsciously ignored Shenyuan Wushuang. He couldn't react for a moment. Seeing Chu Xiu's appearance, even Lu Jianghe felt that Chu Xiu had gone too far. You killed him, but you still don't remember him. If Shenyuan Wushuang's body could be found, he would probably scratch his coffin in anger. After expressing his condolences to Elder Wu with a seemingly sincere expression, Chu Xiu went to meet Fang Yinglong and the others with Lu Jianghe. In the reception hall, Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, Linghu Xianshan, and the other martial immortals of High Heaven Sect were all present. As soon as he saw them, Chu Xiu put on a sorrowful look and said, "I've heard about Brother Shenyuan. I'm sorry for your loss. Although I had some disputes with Brother Shenyuan in the past, it can be said that no discord, no concord. I originally thought that after he became a martial immortal and took over High Heaven Sect, we could meet again, forget our enmity, and guard the Eastern Domain together. I didn't expect that he would be defeated in the Exalted Divine Palace. When I saw him for the last time, I suggested that Brother Shenyuan act with me, but Brother Shenyuan was also a proud man and insisted on killing the demonic ghost with his own strength. I didn't expect that would be the last time we met." Chu Xiu's attitude was extremely sincere, and it didn't make him look sad. Nor did it make others feel that he was being polite. It was as if he was truly sad for the death of an old friend. His acting skills had also improved after he became a martial immortal. Was it? Lu Jianghe also lowered his head behind Chu Xiu, as if he was also silently mourning. However, in reality, he just didn't want Fang Yinglong and the others to see his twisted expression. At this moment, Lu Jianghe was already roaring in his heart, "There's actually such a shameless person in this world." Lu Jianghe was completely convinced. It made sense that Chu Xiu could be the sect leader while he was only a demon exalt. At this moment, Jianghu was truly convinced. There was a reason why Chu Xiu could become the sect master while he was just a demon lord. Fang Yinglong and the others didn't doubt Chu Xiu. It made sense that Xianyuan Wushuang was killed by the demonic ghost. Fang Yinglong and the others didn't doubt Chu Xiu because the evidence was there. They saw with their own eyes that Xianyuan Wushuang died at the hands of the demonic ghost. So, Fang Yinglong just sighed. Qin Baiyuan shook his head helplessly. Maybe this is fate. Of course, it's also our responsibility. Wushuang is too headstrong. We told him before that if he doesn't become a half-step martial immortal in the central province, he can't participate in the competition for the exalted divine palace. But he didn't listen to us. Lu Sanjin of the Imperial Sky Pavilion isn't as strong as him, but he listened to Zhong Qiushui and cultivated in the central province. His strength also improved greatly. He just doesn't understand that only by living can he have a future. If he died, he would be nothing. By the way, Chu, why did you come here this time? Although they didn't doubt Chu Xiu, they didn't believe that Chu Xiu came all the way to High Heaven Sect just to mourn for Xianyuan Wushuang. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I came to ask for help from High Heaven Sect. Sect Master Fang once said that High Heaven Sect can do something for me. I didn't want to use this promise, but now I have no choice. With that, Chu Xiu told Fang Yinglong and the others about the people he offended in the exalted divine palace and their plan to make trouble for him. After listening, Fang Yinglong and the other two felt a toothache. Even they couldn't help but admire Chu Xiu for offending so many powerhouses in one go. How many people did he kill in the exalted divine palace? Fang Yinglong said helplessly, Chu, do you know how much trouble you've gotten yourself into? Since the sword sect of the world wants to make trouble for you, the person who will come will definitely not be ordinary. It's most likely one of the 3 sword saints, Mu Baishuang, who is in the 7th layer martial immortal realm. Of the 3 prime sovereigns, divine dragon subduing general, Su Tianya, is in the 4th layer martial immortal realm. Venerable Gu Yu Fang Baidu is in the 4th layer martial immortal realm. And Venerable Ling Tian, Sheng Jiyuan, is the strongest, having reached the 7th layer martial immortal realm. As for the Sanskrit sect, it's still unknown who they will send. This kind of power is enough to attack my High Heaven sect. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, that's why I came to ask High Heaven sect for help. Of course, if High Heaven sect is in trouble, I can understand. Fang Yinglong and the other 2 looked at each other helplessly. Of course they were in trouble, but could they refuse? High Heaven sect cared about their face, especially when the promise was made in front of everyone. If they went back on their word now, where would the face of a great sect with a history of 10,000 years be? With a sigh, Fang Yinglong said, Chu, you go back first. We will take action, but we need a few days to prepare. Chu Xiu nodded and left with Lu Jianghe. He wasn't worried at all that Fang Yinglong and the others would go back on their word. If they wanted to be perfunctory, they wouldn't be perfunctory here. After Chu Xiu left, Ling Hu Xianshan frowned and said, Are we really going to take action? But with so many martial immortals, how are we going to stop them? Fang Yinglong said helplessly, Words spoken are like water spilled. My High Heaven sect's reputation is important. It's just that when I made a promise to this Chu Xiu, I didn't expect him to cause so much trouble. But don't worry, don't forget where we are. This is the Eastern Territory. If we move the Soaring Heaven Seal to the Southern Barbaric Land, it can be used just as well, but its power will be slightly reduced. It's also good to repel them. Right now, the Southern Territory is eyeing Chu Xiu covetously. He is also a member of the Eastern Territory. With him in the Southern Barbaric Land, he is the first barrier. If he is gone, our situation will be even worse. Hearing that Fang Yinglong wanted to use the Soaring Heaven Seal, Ling Hu Xianshan and Qin Baiyuan were a little surprised. The Soaring Heaven Seal was the most precious treasure of their High Heaven sect. It was built 10,000 years ago when they first came to the Daluotian continent, using a part of the Eastern Territory's dragon vein. At that time, High Heaven sect was the strongest in the entire Eastern Territory, so their first ancestral founder intercepted a section of the dragon vein and refined it into this supreme treasure. However, this thing had some limitations because it was not a weapon and was huge. The further it was from the Eastern Territory's main dragon vein, the weaker its power would be. Therefore, most of the time, it was located inside High Heaven Sect and rarely moved. It had only been used a few times over the past 10,000 years. That was why they were so surprised when Fang Yinglong proposed to use the Soaring Heaven Seal. However, Fang Yinglong was the sect master, and it seemed to be the only way now, so they could only nod and agree. At the same time, outside the World Sword Sect, Mu Baishuang and several other martial immortals had gathered. Beside Mu Baishuang stood a cultivator with a cold face, phoenix eyes, and a long beard. He had an extraordinary bearing. He was Sword Venerable Ling Xiao, Xingjiyuan, who had a good relationship with the World Sword Sect. There were two other people beside him. One of them was a brawny man wearing a bronze dragon-patterned armor. He was dragon-suppressing divine general, Su Tinya. Beside him was a middle-aged man in a white scholar's robe. He was dressed like a teacher. He was Venerable Guyu Fang Baidu. When they learned that their descendants died in the Daluo Divine Palace, they were sad and angry, but more than that, they could not accept it. In fact, when their descendants were preparing to go to the Daluo Divine Palace, they were already mentally prepared. However, they could tolerate their descendants being killed by demonic ghosts due to their lack of strength, but they could not tolerate that they died in the hands of the same person, and that person was Chu Xiu. There was indeed an unspoken rule that Guzun could not intervene when a descendant of Guzun met with an accident during training. If it was just them, even Fang Baidu and Su Tinya had planned to swallow their anger. After all, Chu Xiu was not weak, and he had the support of the Eastern region's great sect, the Imperial Sky Pavilion. However, when Xingjiyuan personally came to find them and said that the World Sword Sect would be participating, they immediately nodded and agreed. Seeing that Mu Baishuang still had no intention of leaving, the slightly impatient Su Tinya could not help but frown. Sword Venerable Mu, why aren't you leaving? Did the World Sword Sect change its mind? Mu Baishuang said indifferently, the World Sword Sect will not change its mind so easily. We are only waiting for one person. The people from the Sanskrit sect have agreed to come. Su Tinya could not help but sneer. I think we shouldn't wait any longer. I'm afraid the people from the Sanskrit sect won't be coming. The Sanskrit sect has been suppressed by the Sky Treasure Temple to begin with, and their new hall master was killed by Chu Xiu in the Daluo Divine Palace. How could they possibly be distracted enough to send someone here? As soon as he finished speaking, the void around him suddenly split open, and a twisted thread of laws surged toward him. Su Tianya's expression changed. With a raise of his hand, the surrounding void froze and turned into dragon scale-like shapes, imprisoning the threads within. However, the thread exuded an extremely powerful destructive power that could destroy everything. In an instant, the dragon scales were all torn apart, and it sliced toward his neck. Dragon roars erupted from Su Tianya's body as he tried to take it head-on. However, beside him, Fang Baidu's expression changed drastically. He formed a seal with his hands, and a white moonlight enveloped Su Tianya, immediately moving him dozens of feet away. The thread with the destructive power brushed past Su Tianya and easily broke through his dragon-shaped energy, leaving a bloody mark on his face. The pitch-black world-destroying fire bloomed, and a figure walked out of it. It turned out to be a tall and thin young man with eyes burning with world-destroying fire. He had a charming and enchanting appearance. That's right, he was charming and enchanting, and it was hard to tell whether he was a man or a woman. His voice was extremely androgynous, and it was impossible to tell whether he was a man or a woman. Su Tianya, if you dare to spout nonsense and slander the Sanskrit sect again, I will send you to accompany that unlucky disciple of yours. Chapter 13-14. When that cultivator from the Sanskrit sect appeared, everyone was shocked. Even Mu Baishuang, who had always been calm, was shocked. Clearly, he didn't expect the Sanskrit sect to send him here. That person was Yin Tuoyuo, the vice leader of the Sanskrit sect's Shiva Palace. He was a fifth-layer martial immortal. In the beginning, the Sanskrit sect didn't have a deputy temple master position. Usually, a temple master would pick a successor from the various palace masters to be groomed. When the temple master felt that his blood chi was getting weaker, he would help the new temple master take over. The Vishnu palace that Shingala was in was like that. However, the previous temple leader died in a hurry, so Een Tualuo took over. Een Tualuo was the successor to Shiva Palace. Originally, he should also be a palace master. However, because he was too powerful, so powerful that he once killed a 7th heaven martial immortal with a 5th heaven martial immortal, a palace master was clearly no longer enough to display his status. However, the previous temple leader wasn't old enough to retire, so the Sanskrit sect gave him the position of vice leader. Een Tualuo was powerful and he was moody. His methods were strange and ruthless. He was very famous in the Daluotian. No one wanted to provoke such a monster, including Mu Baishuang. He even treated Een Tualuo as a cultivator at the same level as him. Although martial immortal was divided into 9 layers, the first 3 layers could be reached by stabilizing one's realm and accumulating comprehension of laws. In other words, even if one didn't cultivate, they could reach the 3rd layer as long as they had enough time. As for the 4th, 5th, and 6th layers, they needed to have a certain level of control over the power of laws. As for the 7th, 8th, and 9th layers, they needed to have a certain level of control over the power of laws, the fusion of one's own power, divine abilities, battle prowess, and so on. No one would be surprised if Een Tualuo killed a 6th layer martial immortal as a 5th layer martial immortal, but he killed a 7th layer martial immortal. That was very shocking. After a while, Mu Baishuang said, "I didn't expect the Sanskrit sect to send you." Een Tualuo said, "I didn't. I came on my own initiative." Mu Baishuang was puzzled. Why? Your Shiva palace is in charge of defending against the main attack of Tianluo Baishuang. Why did you waste your time coming to the east? Een Tualuo's eyes flashed with a hint of confusion. I'm just curious. I'm very curious who killed Xinjiao. Hearing Een Tualuo say this, Mu Baishuang and the others didn't ask anything else. Anyway, everyone knew that Een Tualuo's mental state was clearly a little abnormal. Whatever he said, that was what it was. But Een Tualuo didn't come here just because he was curious. Rather, it was because Xinjiao had previously told him that he had discovered a clue regarding the Mahakala deity palace, and it was on Chu Xiu. After that, Xinjiao entered the exalted divine palace and died there. Een Tualuo wasn't interested in Xinjiao's death, and he wasn't interested in Chu Xiu either. What he was really interested in was the world extinction flame. Although his current cultivation was no weaker than that of the senior from the Shiva palace who had researched the world annihilation flame, the initial method of using the world annihilation flame was in the Mahakala divine palace. The group of people all had their own thoughts as they set off. Fang Baidu asked curiously, "Sword Exalt Mu, how do we get there?" Mu Baishuang pointed to the east and said, "Of course we go there like this. Haven't you been to the East Territory before?" Fang Baidu said, "Of course I have been to the East Territory, but are we just going to go there like this? Don't we need to take a detour or cover up?" Mu Baishuang said lightly, "We just want to move against Chu Xiu, not the High Heaven Sect's sect master. Why go through so much trouble?" Hearing Mu Baishuang say this, Fang Baidu was a little speechless. He had always heard that the cultivators of the world's sword sects acted in a straightforward manner, and he had finally witnessed it today. But it didn't matter. The combined strength of all of them was terrifying enough to even attack High Heaven Sect. At this time, outside the southern barbarian border, Chu Xiu had already dispersed some of his people to prevent the power of a martial immortal from affecting them if they fought. Fang Yinglong and the others arrived 2 days after Chu Xiu's return, but when they saw what they had prepared, even Chu Xiu was surprised. No wonder the southern territories' combined strength was so much stronger than the east territories, but they did not attack High Heaven Sect with great fanfare. It turned out that High Heaven Sect had such a trump card. Unless they besieged Fang Yinglong in the Blessed Paradise like last time, the difficulty of killing Fang Yinglong in the Eastern Territory, especially in High Heaven Sect, was no less than killing a peak 9th Heaven Master. Chu Xiu waited at the border for a few days before Mu Baishuang and the others appeared. But when they saw Chu Xiu openly waiting for them here, the expressions of Su Tianya and the others changed. They did not believe that this was a coincidence, and they all looked at Mu Baishuang. They had only talked about this matter in the sword sect of the world, so how did Chu Xiu know about it in advance? Mu Baishuang was very indifferent at this time. He frowned slightly and said, "It seems that there are still spies from other sects in my sword sect of the world. The purge 10 years ago did not get rid of all those people. You know the purpose of our visit today, but you still stay here. You must have something to rely on, right?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "You used such a big force to find trouble with me. If I am not prepared, wouldn't I be courting death?" Fang Yinglong and the others did not hide. As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, they also walked out from behind Chu Xiu. Mu Baishuang frowned slightly. This group of people in the Eastern Territory was quite united. He had heard that there was some conflict between Chu Xiu and High Heaven Sect before, but he did not expect that they would actually take action for Chu Xiu now. Su Tianya said hatefully, "You from High Heaven Sect, we are not here for the Eastern Territory, so why bother stopping us? Chu Xiu killed a disciple of our faction in the Great Luo Divine Palace. We are just here to settle our personal grievances and seek justice." Fang Yinglong said lightly, "My High Heaven Sect owes Chu Xiu a favor. No matter what, this favor must be repaid. Stopping you is the same as returning the favor." Chu Xiu showed a sarcastic smile. "You ancient sovereigns really can't afford to play around. Fighting in the Great Luo Divine Palace is a matter of life and death. What's more, they are all descendants of the ancient sovereigns. But now that they are dead, you come to find trouble with me. Do you think the rules of the ancient sovereigns are nothing but farts?" Su Tianya glared at Chu Xiu. "Your disciple is dead, so what rules do you care about? Chu Xiu, the subduing dragon divine general's bloodline will not rest until you are dead." On the side, Fang Baidu pulled him aside and said in a deep voice, "Rules are for the living, not for the dead. Who said that we attacked today to avenge our disciple? We only came at the invitation of the World Sword Sect. Is that not enough?" Su Tianya was an impulsive person, and once he was angry, he would not care about anything else. However, Fang Baidu still knew his limits. Their actions today had indeed violated the rules of the ancient sovereigns. Although no one would come to find trouble with them, it would not be pleasant to say the least. Chu Xiu shook his head and looked at Fang Yinglong. "Sect Master Fang, with so many martial immortal realm masters acting shamelessly together, I have no choice but to leave this matter to you." Fang Yinglong nodded and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, I will now give you one last chance to leave the Eastern Territory. Otherwise, you may not have the chance to even if you want to." Mu Baishuang raised his eyebrows and said, "Oh? I would like to give it a try." With that, Mu Baishuang, Yin Tuoyuo, and Sword Exalted Ling Tian, Xing Juyuan, stood out together. Two 7th-level martial immortals, plus Yin Tuoyuo, who had the strength to kill 7th-level martial immortals, were not afraid of Fang Yinglong, who was only an 8th-level martial immortal. However, at that moment, Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and Linghu Immortal Mountain all formed hand seals. In an instant, like an earth dragon turning over, the entire southern barbaric land trembled. Feeling the powerful tremor, the expressions of Mu Baishuang and the others changed. What could cause such a huge tremor? Could it be that a peak expert of the 9th Heaven Martial Immortal Realm had appeared in the High Heaven Sect? Before they could react, the ground in front of them had already been torn apart. A seal of several thousand feet, like a small mountain, abruptly emerged from the ground. The seal was incomparably white, as if it was made of white jade. Countless dragon patterns and various runes were engraved on it, shining brightly. Most importantly, the power of the seal itself was a type of world energy. It represented the eastern region's world energy, and was the great power gathered by the dragon vein. Even Chu Xiu was shocked when he saw it. He knew about it before, but he didn't expect the seal to be so big. However, the moment he saw it, Chu Xiu suddenly thought of something. The rootless sacred flame of their Kunlun devil cult was actually the same kind of existence as the soaring sky seal. They were both rare treasures left behind after the laws of the world had been materialized. However, the soaring sky seal had been refined by the founder of the High Heaven sect, so it could be used at will. However, apart from Wuxia, who could temporarily activate the rootless sacred flame with the power of the same origin, no one else could use it. In that case, could he think of a way to use the rootless sacred flame to refine something like the Ling Shao Wuji seal? The reason why Chu Xiu was daydreaming was because he was not worried that Fang Yinglong and the others would not be able to stop it. Since Fang Yinglong had promised him, the other party must be confident of winning. Sure enough, when the soaring sky seal appeared, the faces of Mu Baishuang and Yin Tuoyuo turned solemn. They were all cultivators from top sects, and they knew how powerful this kind of supreme treasure refined from a divine object was. It was definitely an existence that could suppress an entire sect. On top of the soaring heavens Wuji seal, the 5 of them were imprisoned on the spot. It was as if the ground was shackling them. A loud explosion sounded out. Mu Baishuang and the other 2 used all their strength to block the soaring sky Wuji seal. Mu Baishuang shouted at Su Tianya and Fang Baidu, "Why aren't you 2 helping? What are you waiting for?" Chapter 13-15. Mu Baishuang and the others could not stop it, even if Su Tianya and Fang Baidu joined forces. Su Tianya's physical strength was shocking. As he performed the secret skill of dragon transformation, he turned into a giant dragon that was hundreds of feet long and tried to lift the soaring sky Wuji seal. However, he ended up vomiting blood because of the power of the seal. This seal, which looked like a hill, was actually part of the power of the dragon vein in the entire Eastern Territory. Even if a martial immortal could control the principles, it was impossible to destroy a part of the Eastern Territory. The 5 of them worked together, but they were still pressed down by the soaring sky and infinite seal. The ground beneath their feet cracked inch by inch, and they were unable to escape. At this time, Fang Yinglong looked at Mu Baishuang with murderous intent. He exchanged a glance with Qin Baiyuan and Immortal Linghu. The 2 of them also understood Fang Yinglong's meaning and nodded. Fang Yinglong wanted to kill Mu Baishuang. In fact, this was the first time Fang Yinglong had used the soaring heaven seal. No one had attacked High Heaven sect for so many years, so there was naturally no opportunity to use this supreme treasure. But when he used it this time, Fang Yinglong found that the power of the soaring heaven seal was somewhat beyond his imagination. Previously, Mu Baishuang had joined forces with the Southern Territory to kill him in the Blessed Paradise. His intentions were clear. Since he had the opportunity now, why couldn't he kill Mu Baishuang and make the world's sword sect have one less sword saint? Fang Yinglong was also a ruthless person who acted decisively. Since the 2 sides had already fallen out and a battle was inevitable, he would kill as many as he could now. The 3 of them looked at each other and pushed the power of the Ling Shao Wuji seal to its maximum level. In an instant, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The ground under their feet had already cracked and half of their bodies had sunk into the ground. At this time, Chu Xiu's eyes also flashed with murderous intent. In any case, there was already a death feud between them. If he did not kill them now, it would be even more troublesome. However, he was not from High Heaven sect, so he could not control the soaring heaven seal or even enter the range of the seal. He could only prepare for a sneak attack from the side. Sensing the killing intent coming from Chu Xiu, Yin Tuoyuo suddenly said, "Everyone, help me hold them off for a while. Fang Baidu, use your Guyu bloodline's secret art to send me out to kill Chu Xiu." Su Tianya forced himself to say, "Why are we the ones carrying this thing and not you?" Yin Tuoyuo said indifferently, "My strength isn't as great as yours. Letting me carry this fellow is purely a waste." Carrying the soaring Shao Wuji seal required immense power. Although Yin Tuoyuo had the achievement of killing 7th-level martial immortals, he was not a true 7th-level martial immortal. In terms of power, he was truly inferior to Su Tianya, who had a powerful physical body. Hearing this, Su Tianya could only snort coldly and say, "Hurry up, we can't hold on for much longer." Although they were working together now, Su Tianya had not forgotten the scar that Yin Tuoyuo had left on his face previously. Seeing that everyone agreed, Fang Baidu immediately formed hand seals. Moonlight enveloped Yin Tuoluo's body and transported him out of the range of the soaring Shao Wuji seal. However, as Yin Tuoluo left, the bodies of Su Tianya and the others immediately sank, and the pressure on them increased greatly. In the next moment, Yin Tuoluo's figure turned into a black mist and instantly appeared before Chu Xiu. Just as Chu Xiu was about to attack, Yin Tuoluo's voice suddenly reached Chu Xiu's ears. "Tell me where the people of Mahakala Deity Palace are, and I will immediately retreat and help you kill Mu Baishuang and the others. I swear by the great god Shiva, I am not deceiving you." Chu Xiu was slightly taken aback and transmitted his voice. "Aren't you working together with Mu Baishuang and the others? Also, I killed Xianjiao. Even if you swear by the three gods of Sanskrit, I won't believe you." Yin Tuoluo said indifferently, "I can't betray you just because I'm working together. Their value is not comparable to Mahakala Deity Palace. As for Xianjiao, who told you that I have to avenge him? He is the Lord of Vishnu Palace, and I am from Shiva Palace. Unless the sect leader wants me to kill you, I have no interest in avenging him. The belief of us Sanskrit martial artists towards the three natal gods is branded in our minds, so you don't have to worry that I will lie to you." Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Unfortunately, I don't believe you, and even if I believe you, I don't want to say it." There were many people who had seen him use the world-extinguishing flame, and Xianjiao had already confirmed that he was related to Mahakala Deity Palace, so he did not think of hiding it. Therefore, the enmity between him and Sanskrit was already destined to be irreconcilable. Even if Yin Tuoluo did not come to find trouble with him, when the battle between Sanskrit and Tianluo Treasure Temple was over, there would be other people who would come to find trouble with him. Therefore, Yin Tuoluo's promise was not very useful to Chu Xiu. Yin Tuoluo was not angry, he just laughed and said, "Xianjiao is right. You are a stubborn person, like those bald donkeys of Tianluo Treasure Temple, stubborn and unyielding. But it doesn't matter, I can even break the golden iron heads of those bald donkeys. I don't believe that your head is harder than theirs." Chu Xiu snorted coldly, "Vulgar words, who are you calling bald donkeys?" As Chu Xiu's voice fell, his left hand formed a seal, and the 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet on his right hand shone brightly. The 6 paths of heaven and earth, the rules of life and death, transformed into a huge wheel and descended. In the hell path, endless flames surged, wrapping around Yin Tuoluo's body. The animal path absorbed the heaven and earth essence chi, transforming into countless ferocious beasts that bit towards Yin Tuoluo. The Azura path transformed into murderous aura, transforming into countless murderous weapons that slashed down. In the hungry ghost path, all kinds of strange-looking hungry ghosts pounced towards Yin Tuoluo, tearing at his primordial spirit. The celestial path's divine might was vast. The golden Buddha figure towered between heaven and earth, and the divine seal crashed down. The mortal path's power was the strangest. A misty aura erupted, strangling all power. These 6 paths rotated, and they were incomparably real. Every strike seemed to make Yin Tuoluo fall into the real 6 paths of reincarnation, his body and mind suffering double torture. True and false, reality and illusion, recreating reincarnation, this was Chu Xiu's 6 paths of Saha Splendor Wheel. When Chu Xiu studied this technique, he was still a little humble and underestimated its power. At that time, Chu Xiu had thought that this technique was not inferior to Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Brilliance Wheel. However, from the looks of it now, it was even better than Jun Wuxian's 6 paths of Pagoda Disillusionment Brilliance Wheel. This was the first time this technique was used among the Daluotian, and even though Yin Tuoluo was strong, he was still caught off guard. The 6 paths of reincarnation and rebirth scripture was a cultivation method that no one in the heavenly Luo temple cultivated. In fact, 10,000 years ago in the lower realm, the heavenly Luo temple's martial artists had already given up on this cultivation method because some parts of it were too evil and did not conform to the heavenly Luo temple's cultivation method. Yin Tuoluo had fought with the heavenly Luo temple all his life, and he almost recognized all the techniques of the heavenly Luo temple, but this was the first time he saw a technique with the 6 paths of reincarnation as its core. But even though he did not understand it, he could tell at a glance that the core of the other's technique was definitely from the heavenly Luo temple's lineage. Extreme world annihilation fire bloomed around Yin Tuolyuo's body, breaking free from the strangulation of the 6 paths of reincarnation. The fire was incomparably black to the extent that when it burned, it swallowed the surrounding light. Chu Xiu had also cultivated the world annihilation fire, but Yin Tuolyuo's world annihilation fire had already gone down a different path from the world annihilation fire that he had cultivated. Chu Xiu's world annihilation fire was closer to the original version of the great Mahakala deity palace's world annihilation fire. World annihilation fire and creation fire, destruction and rebirth, all in a single thought. Hope could be born in the fire, but it could also destroy everything. All things were reincarnation. But Yin Tuolyuo's world annihilation fire was extreme to the extreme, swallowing all power. To be more precise, it was no longer swallowing, but simply erasing. Under the burning of the world annihilation fire, all power was erased as if it had never existed. But this power was not absolute. At least, in the continuous rotation of the 6 paths of reincarnation, the primal chaos fog produced by the human realm had always imprisoned Yin Tuolyuo in a space, making it impossible for him to break free. Even if the world annihilation fire erased him, it would immediately replenish his power. Yin Tuolyuo snorted coldly and said, "When it comes to the 6 paths of reincarnation, you still say that you are not like those bald donkeys? But you want to trap me with just this bit of power?" Yin Tuolyuo's body began to melt strangely, as if the world annihilation fire had begun to backfire, melting his entire body. But Chu Xiu could clearly feel that Yin Tuolyuo was indeed melting, but not because of the backfire, but because he had integrated into the laws of this world. After Yin Tuolyuo's body completely disappeared, Chu Xiu immediately put away the 6 paths Saha wheel. Golden Sanskrit and monstrous demonic chi battle armor appeared around him, and powerful power instantly spread around him. At the same time, Yin Tuolyuo's body also strangely appeared in mid-air, without any warning, like a sudden breeze. The endless world annihilation fire turned into threads and coiled around Chu Xiu's invincible holy demon body, immediately giving off a series of ear-piercing explosions. The combination of Buddha and demon, the rotation of yin and yang. The invincible holy demon body that Chu Xiu had deduced was a combination of the invincible golden body and the 9 heavens demonic golden body, the 2 strongest body-refining techniques. No matter how overbearing Yin Tuolyuo's world annihilation fire was, it could not break it in an instant. In the next moment, Chu Xiu's body instantly grew by hundreds of feet, turning into an ancient demon god that roared. After using the law phenomenon of heaven and earth, for some reason, it resonated with the Ling Shao Wuji seal, causing the Ling Shao Wuji seal to erupt with a dazzling golden light, and its power increased by 30%. With a punch, the world annihilation fire in front of Yin Tuolyuo exploded. Although he blocked the punch, he was also sent flying by the punch. Chu Xiu looked up at his fist. The law phenomenon of heaven and earth had actually been corroded by the other party's world annihilation fire. It was enough to show that the other party had even cultivated the world annihilation fire to the extent that it could devour the power of rules. But in the next moment, the majestic energy immediately filled up the corroded body, and it fell again, crashing towards Yin Tuolyuo like a mountain. Just now, when Yin Tuolyuo had taken the law phenomenon of heaven and earth's attack head-on, he already knew how powerful the other party's divine power was. Seeing that the mountain-sized fist was crashing down, he could only fuse the world annihilation fire into the power of rules and hide within it to dodge. When Mu Baishuang, who was bitterly resisting the Ling Shao Wuji seal, saw this, he could not help but shake his head gently. They had lost this time. Chapter 13:16. What surprised Mu Baishuang and the others the most this time was not High Heaven Sect's intervention, but rather Chu Xiu's strength. Yin Tuolyuo was 2 celestial layers higher than Chu Xiu, and he had the battle record of killing a 7th celestial layer martial artist. In the end, when facing Chu Xiu, he was actually at a disadvantage. How could he still fight? Even if they died, they would not be able to win. So, Mu Baishuang made a prompt decision. The next moment, the long sword in his hand suddenly burst with a blood-colored light. Endless blood chi poured into the long sword, shattering its sword spirit and turning into countless sword shadows that tore through the sky. Finally, it broke through the shackles of the soaring heaven seal. Run! With a single word, everyone took advantage of the countless sword shadows to escape from the range of the soaring heaven seal, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Yin Tuoyuo also emerged from the void and took a deep look at Chu Xiu before his figure turned into a black mist and flew away. By the time Fang Yinglong and the others tore the sword shadows apart, Mu Baishuang and the others, who were at the martial immortal level, had already disappeared. Fang Yinglong and the others gasped at the same time and pressed the soaring heaven seal back into the ground. This kind of powerful natural treasure, even if it had been refined by their ancestral master, was still extremely difficult for them to operate. Fang Yinglong sneered. Mu Baishuang shattered his sword spirit. I estimate that he won't be able to recover without some time. The world's sword sect should behave for a while this time. After saying that, Fang Yinglong and the others all looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Although they were operating the soaring heaven seal just now, they had been observing Chu Xiu. The Daluo Divine Palace was indeed a magical place. Stepping into the martial immortal realm in one step and crossing the heavens and man boundary, it could be said to be the fastest place to increase one's strength. But Chu Xiu's strength was not only rising quickly, it was also a bit abnormal. In particular, in the two moves he exchanged with Yin Tuoyuo just now, Yin Tuoyuo, who was famous in the Western domain, was at a disadvantage. Chu Xiu cupped his fists to Fang Yinglong and the others. Thank you, Sect Master Fang, for your help. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have gotten through this trouble so easily. Fang Yinglong waved his hand and said, I, Fang Yinglong, will not go back on my words. When Chu saved me, it was much more dangerous than this. But Chu... Fang Yinglong wanted to persuade Chu Xiu to leave a way out next time, but when he thought of Chu Xiu's character, he didn't continue to persuade him. In fact, Yinglong also wanted to persuade him, but thinking about Chu Xiu, he didn't continue. Ling 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 ling, layer, Chu Xiu Chun Xing Saint. If he tried to persuade Chu Xiu now, it would seem a little hypocritical. Therefore, Fang Yinglong directly said, Chu, we came out with the sect's treasures. We can't be away for too long, so we'll be going back first. Be careful and take care of yourself. Chu Xiu nodded and said, Take care, sect leader Fang. Just after Fang Yinglong and the others left, Mu Baishuang and the others finally stopped at a place dozens of miles away from the southern barbaric land, but they all looked extremely embarrassed. Su Tianya glared at Yin Tuoyuo and said angrily, What did you say before? We will help you deal with the Ling Shao Wuji seal, while you go kill Chu Xiu. In the end, you went to kill Chu Xiu, who was weaker than you, and even got suppressed by him. Before Su Tianya could finish his words, the boundless world extinguishing flames engulfed him. This time, Su Tianya reacted. He turned into a dragon, dodged to the side, and shouted angrily, Yin Tuoyuo, what do you mean? Yin Tuoyuo's face was cold and he said, Su Tianya, watch your words. Don't forget who you're talking to. You're not old yet. If you take another disciple, he can inherit your divine dragon general bloodline. But if you dare to talk nonsense again, believe it or not, I'll really exterminate your bloodline. Fang Baidu hurriedly cupped his hands and said, Hall Master Yin Tuoyuo, please don't take offense. Brother Su has such a character. He doesn't mean any harm. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya had known each other since they were young. He knew each other's temperament. Even after stepping into the martial immortal realm, he didn't restrain himself. Instead, he became more and more fierce. If the two of them joined forces, it wouldn't be easy for a level 7 martial immortal to kill them. But the problem was that Su Tianya had the Sanskrit sect behind him. Provoking the hall master of the Sanskrit sect wasn't something that could be settled so easily. Mu Baishuang's face was a bit pale. Hearing that, he said indifferently, Don't blame Hall Master Yin Tuoyuo for this. We know too little about Chu Xiu. Hall Master Yin Tuoyuo's cultivation technique is strange and unpredictable. It's suitable for unorthodox attacks. With the world annihilation fire, even a level 7 martial immortal can't take it head-on. But Chu Xiu's cultivation technique is extremely fierce and violent. His body-tempering secret technique is comparable to the heavenly treasure Buddha's indestructible golden body. He also has a strength-type divine power, which happens to restrain Hall Master Yin Tuoluo. That's why he became like this. Mu Baishuang said something fair. Yin Tuoluo didn't underestimate his enemy, but he didn't understand Chu Xiu at all. Moreover, they really didn't have time to continue fighting, so they waited for Yin Tuoluo to understand. By the way, the three of you are Gu Zun's successors. Can't you tell which faction Chu Xiu comes from? Mu Baishuang suddenly asked. Hearing Mu Baishuang's question, Su Tianya and the others were taken aback. Only then did they realize what they had been neglecting, Chu Xiu's identity. Because Chu Xiu's actions didn't seem like a Gu Zun's successor. He always liked to hang out with people from the Jianghu, and his methods were far different from the Gu Zun's successor who acted alone. Most importantly, even they couldn't tell who Chu Xiu's master was from his cultivation technique. Su Tianya looked at Xing Juyuan and said, "Brother Xing, your sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage has a longer history than ours. As early as 10,000 years ago in the lower realm, you were already a famous great-grandmaster of the sword. Can you tell who Chu Xiu is from his cultivation technique?" Sheng Jun shook his head and said, "I can't. This kid cultivates Taoism, Buddhism, and demonic at the same time. It seems to be the routine of the school of miscellany. Most cultivators who are independent cultivators would only cultivate like this when they are hungry. However, there are far too few who can reach the martial immortal realm and cross the boundary between heaven and man. Even if there are, they can't even compare to Chu Xiu, let alone his master." Su Tianya frowned and said, "That's strange. Could it be that this Chu Xiu popped out from a crack in a rock?" Fang Baidu said, 10,000 years ago, when our ancestral master came to the Daluotian, there were also many masters who cultivated in seclusion in the lower realm who came to the Daluotian. At that time, there were too many people and it was impossible to count. Perhaps Chu Xiu's ancestral master was one of these people, and he has been cultivating in seclusion since he came to the Daluotian. Everyone was guessing, but they had no clue. At this time, Mu Baishuang suddenly realized that Yin Tuoluo had disappeared without them noticing. He should have rushed back to the Sanskrit sect. Mu Baishuang also said to the others, "In that case, we will take our leave first. This time, the plan has failed, and we can't touch Chu Xiu for the time being. At least in the Eastern Territory, under the protection of High Heaven Sect, if you want to touch Chu Xiu, you have to weigh the weight of High Heaven Sect." With that, Mu Baishuang and Sheng Juyuan rushed to the World Sword Sect. Sheng Juyuan had a good relationship with the World Sword Sect. Every once in a while, Sheng Juyuan would come to the World Sword Sect to exchange sword Dao with the sword seniors of the World Sword Sect, and also give pointers to the disciples of the World Sword Sect. At this time, his disciple had just died, and he was in a bad mood, so he came to the World Sword Sect to stay for a while. Su Tianya and Fang Baidu looked at each other and had no choice but to leave. Without everyone's help, they didn't dare to find trouble with Chu Xiu alone. In Sangnan Mansion, Lu Jiang saw that Chu Xiu had returned so soon, and he couldn't help asking in surprise, "Didn't you say that many martial immortals came to find trouble with you? Those guys can't be so weak, right? Did they cower when they saw High Heaven Sect attack?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "After a fight, they found out that they couldn't do anything to me, so they retreated. Those people are not idiots. Even if they knew they couldn't kill me, they still insisted on fighting to the death. However, High Heaven Sect's trump card is really terrifying. Even if they don't have a ninth heaven martial immortal expert, they still can't be underestimated. Sects that truly stood at the peak of the Daluotian all had a ninth heaven martial immortal expert, but High Heaven Sect didn't have one in this generation. However, with the power of the Soaring Heaven Seal, High Heaven Sect wouldn't be so easy to break. You and Qinglian take care of the Daluotian side for the time being. I'm going to the lower realm." Lu Jiang said in surprise, "The Heavenly Gate has been destroyed, and the other sects have all behaved themselves. Why are you going to the lower realm?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "I'm going to find a few helpers to deal with the Daluotian troubles." Back in the Daluotian Divine Palace, when Chu Xiu started killing people, he was already mentally prepared. There would definitely be a lot of trouble in the future. Although the Daluotian Divine Palace was filled with people fighting and killing each other, every time the Daluotian Divine Palace ended, there would always be people taking the opportunity to settle all kinds of grievances, not to mention that Chu Xiu had killed even more people. So, when Chu Xiu went to the lower realm to attack the Heavenly Gate, he had already been thinking about this matter, but he didn't expect the other party to come so quickly. After giving some instructions to Lu Jianghe and Mei Qinglian, Chu Xiu went straight back to the lower realm and went to moon-worshipping religion of West Chu. After the Battle of Heavenly Gate, the Yuan Qi in the lower realm began to spread on a large scale with the Heavenly Gate as the center. Almost every day, people felt the Yuan Qi skyrocket. So, when Chu Xiu came to moon-worshipping religion, most of the leaders of moon-worshipping religion were in retreat. Yi Xiaonan was in retreat to digest the insights he had gained from the battle with Jun Wuxian, and the 9 divine Magispriests were also in retreat to seek a breakthrough. Only an older high priest, who had no hope of reaching the martial immortal realm in this lifetime, did not go into retreat and came out to greet Chu Xiu. The high priest of moon-worshipping religion bowed respectfully to Chu Xiu and asked, "May I know why official Chu has come to my moon-worshipping religion? The sect leader is currently in retreat. Do you need me to inform him?" Since the Battle of Heavenly Gate, Wind Sweeping Tower had re-ranked the sovereign list. Chu Xiu was ranked 3rd, behind Zhong Shenxiu. Under the premise that Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji had become legends and Zhong Shenxiu appeared and disappeared unpredictably, Chu Xiu was the #1 sovereign powerhouse in the current Jianghu. The high priest of moon-worshipping religion had no choice but to respect him. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No need, I'm here to see the saintess of moon-worshipping religion." Chapter 13-17. Chu Xiu's sudden visit to the moon-worshipping cult's holy maiden puzzled the high priest. After all, with Chu Xiu's current strength and status, he no longer needed to deal with warriors at the level of the moon-worshipping cult's holy maiden. However, since Chu Xiu said so, the high priest still called the moon-worshipping church's saintess over. The holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult was wearing a colorful short skirt that was unique to Miaojiang. Her hair was adorned with all kinds of silver ornaments. She did not have the seductive and evil feeling of the devil cult's holy maiden. Instead, she gave off a lively feeling. However, when she saw Chu Xiu, the holy maiden smiled charmingly. "Cult Master Chu, why are you looking for me? My life was saved by you, Cult Master Chu. I will do whatever Cult Master Chu wants me to do." Chu Xiu was unmoved. He just asked the high priest, "I want to take your holy maiden away. Do I need to tell Cult Master Yi?" Before the high priest could answer, the holy maiden waved her hand and said, "No need. My status in the moon-worshipping cult is second only to the cult master. I still have this power. The cult master is in seclusion, so don't disturb him." Chu Xiu nodded. "Okay, let's go." With that, Chu Xiu left with the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping church. The moon-worshipping church's holy maiden turned around and playfully waved at the moon-worshipping church's high priest. Then, she skipped after Chu Xiu and left. The high priest shook his head helplessly. In fact, it was somewhat against the rules for the holy maiden to leave just like that. However, he had watched the moon-worshipping sect's saintess grow up. Like him, she was also from Miaojiang, so he treated the moon-worshipping sect's saintess like his own daughter. However, when he thought about her identity, the high priest felt a little heartache. She might have less lifespan than an old man like him. Let her do whatever she wants. Moreover, the high priest of the moon-worshipping cult was not worried that Chu Xiu would have any evil intentions. Chu Xiu was strong, but the moon-worshipping church was not a pushover. Moreover, if Chu Xiu really had evil intentions towards the moon-worshipping church, then when Yi Xiaonan was seriously injured in the Elysium, Chu Xiu could have already taken action. Outside the moon-worshipping cult, Chu Xiu asked the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult, "You still don't know what I want you to do, and you agree to go with me?" The Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult shook her head indifferently. "Anyway, you saved my life. Even if you really want me to die, I've lived for so long. It's worth it. However, the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult then said with a smile, "But I believe that Leader Chu will not harm me, right?" Chu Xiu said, "It's a little dangerous, but I believe that with your ability, it shouldn't be a problem. By the way, I still don't know your name." It should be said that it was not only Chu Xiu who did not know, but the entire underworld did not know the name of the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult. From the day she stepped into the underworld, the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult was her code name, her name, everything about her. Even within the moon-worshipping cult, whether it was other disciples or Dong Huangtai and the others, they all called her the Holy Virgin. So now that Chu Xiu asked this question, even the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult was stunned. She froze for a moment before saying, "My name is Long Long." After the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult finished speaking, Chu Xiu was also stunned. He did not expect that the Holy Virgin of the moon-worshipping cult would be called Long Longer. Seeing Chu Xiu's expression, Long Longer could not help but pout and said with dissatisfaction, "Why, is it strange that I have this name? Long is the surname of the Miao tribe. I was born with sharp eyes and eyebrows, so what's wrong with calling me Long Long?" Chu Xiu coughed and said, "It's nothing. By the way, you should know the effect of the longevity goo. Your talent is not weak, and you can reach the heaven and earth mystic connecting realm by your own cultivation. Why do you need to feed the longevity goo with your blood essence and lifespan?" Long Longer paused and said lightly, "There are many things in this world that you can't do even if you want to. There are many helpless things in the world, and I am just one of them. I joined the moon-worshipping cult at the age of 7. Before joining the moon-worshipping cult, my parents were killed by mountain bandits. I want revenge, so I need strength and status. But Miao Territory's Gu technique is not a quick method, and my talent is not amazing enough to be the best in the entire moon-worshipping cult at such a young age. The huge moon-worshipping cult will not help me take revenge for a low-level disciple who has just entered. So competing for the saintess and feeding the longevity goo with my blood is a very good choice. Fortunately, I succeeded and became the saintess of the moon-worshipping cult. Although my strength is not enough, I have a status comparable to the 9 great magi priests, and I can command many moon-worshipping cult disciples to help me take revenge. Do you regret it now? Long Longer shook her head and said, "I don't regret it, because my heart was filled with hatred at that time, and there was no other choice. After taking revenge, even if I knew that I have the longevity goo and can reach the mystic connecting realm in one step, I still desperately cultivated. Not because I am persistent in martial arts, but because I don't want to be as helpless as I was when I was young. I don't want to be able to control my own fate, I just want to have the opportunity to choose my fate in the future." Chu Xiu looked at Long Longer in surprise. She was very open-minded, even more open-minded than many of the older generation martial artists. Mental state has nothing to do with strength or age, and nowadays, there are many people who are regressing as they live. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "But you still have a chance. Although I don't know the strength of the first-generation saintess of the moon-worshipping cult, she is at most a half-step martial immortal, not a true martial immortal. So, as long as you can step into the martial immortal realm in the future, you can use the power of rules to cleanse your body, and you will naturally be able to get rid of the longevity goo's imprint and gain a portion of your lifespan." Long Longer smiled and said, "Thank you, Cult Master Chu, for your auspicious words. If it was anyone else, I would definitely not believe it, but if it was you, Cult Master Chu, I would definitely believe it. Oh, right, where are we going?" After leaving the moon-worshipping cult, Chu Xiu had been leading her west, but not in the direction of Kunlun Mountain, but the Western Desert. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Western Desert Sword King City, to see an old friend, and to tell you what you are going to do." Western Desert, on top of the Sword King City's city wall, Feng Qishao was holding a sword, leaning against the city's flag, and sipping on a bottle of wine. Boring. This is so fucking boring. When will these days come to an end? Feng Qishao looked very dispirited. His hair was unkempt, and there were 2 big bags under his eyes, as if he had been ravaged by someone. Even his favorite wine, the 9-brewed wine presented by the tribes of the small countries in the western region, was tasteless to him. Brother Fong, were you punished by sect Master Shin again? 7th young Master Fong was stunned when he heard that voice. Then, he crawled to his feet with a grunt and looked at Chu Xiu and Long Ling, who were standing on the city wall, with pleasant surprise. Brother Chu, Official Chu, Cult Master Chu, are you here to save me from the abyss of suffering? Hurry up and take me away. If you show up, I guarantee that the sect master won't even dare to fart. 7th young Master Fong's expression was a little agitated as he rambled on. Only then did he notice Long Ling, who was beside Chu Xiu. He scratched his head and gave a confident smile. Miss, you look very familiar. I'm Fong Qishao. Miss, you must have heard of me, I wonder. Before he could finish speaking, a 3-headed snake popped out from Long Linger's snow-white shoulder, staring at him like a tiger watching its prey. 3-headed gold-swallowing snake. You are the holy maiden of the moon-worshipping cult. Fong Qishao was shocked and quickly jumped to the side. He had interacted with Long Linger before and had met her a few times. But at that time, Long Linger was dressed in white and wore a veil. Now that she had changed her clothes, Fong Qishao couldn't recognize her. Chu Xiu coughed and said, Brother Fong, what's wrong? Fong Qishao sighed and said, Don't mention it. The sect master wants to hand over the position of Sword King City Lord to me. That's a good thing. The sect master of Sword King City, Fong Qishao, will definitely be more domineering than the Sword Chief, Fong Qishao. 7th young Master Fong said with a face full of resentment, Good things? The sect master said that I'm strong enough, but before I can take over Sword King City, I need to have the ability to be the sect master. That's why I've been learning how to be a sect master from the sect master. I've been dealing with the messy affairs of the small countries and tribes in the western regions. I also have to pay attention to the various movements in the Jianghu, as well as the F*** king matters in the sect, and so on. My head is about to explode. At this time, a voice was heard. Be ****. These are the basic requirements of a sect master. How can you be a sect master if you don't know anything? Heavenly King Shen walked up and bowed respectfully to Chu Xiu. Greetings, Cult Master Chu. I didn't know Cult Master Chu was coming. Please forgive me for not going out to greet you. At this time, Heavenly King Shen didn't dare to be disrespectful to Chu Xiu. It should be said that in the whole Jianghu, except for the old Heavenly Master and Yi Shaonan, no one dared to be disrespectful to Chu Xiu. Of course, Lu Changlu could do the same, but he didn't know that. Heavenly King Shen thought about how he had stopped Fong Qishao from interacting with Chu Xiu. Now that he thought about it, Heavenly King Shen only felt that he was very lucky. He was glad that he didn't go too far back then. Now that Chu Xiu had dominated the Jianghu, if Sword King City encountered any danger in the future, as long as Fong Qishao asked, Chu Xiu would definitely help. Just like the Mo family of Shangyang. Although they weren't very powerful, everyone knew that their family head, Mo Tianlin, was a good friend of Chu Xiu in the past. Therefore, even the Shangshuaying family, the leader of the 9 aristocratic families, had to be very polite to them. Their karmic relationship with the cult master Chu Xiu was a great opportunity that they couldn't even beg for. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, Sect Master Shin, you don't have to be so polite. I'm actually here to borrow someone from you. Heavenly King Shin immediately said, Who does Cult Master Chu want to borrow? Just say it. Chu Xiu pointed at Fong Qishao and said, It's Brother Fong. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Fong Qishao's face immediately revealed a look of ecstasy. He thought to himself, Brother Chu really knows me. However, Heavenly King Shin's face revealed a troubled expression. Chapter 13:18. Hearing that Chu Xiu wanted to borrow Fong Qishao for a while, Heavenly King Shin was put in a difficult position. If it was anything else, Heavenly King Shin would definitely not hesitate. But Fong Qishao was the future heir of Sword King City. If Fong Qishao worked a little harder, he would already be the heir. Heavenly King Shin did not want anything to happen to Fong Qishao. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, Sect Master Shin, don't worry. Let's find a quiet place to talk. After Heavenly King Shen brought Chu Xiu to a secret room, Chu Xiu took out the sword soul he had found in the storm sword mound. Although Heavenly King Shen did not know what it was, he could feel that it contained a shocking sword intent. Chu Xiu said, "You all know that Yan Ji has entered the martial immortal stage. But in reality, Yan Ji is not a real martial immortal. To be more precise, he is a fake martial immortal. I found this sword soul in the storm sword mound. As long as you nourish it with the sword spirit's sword chi for 1,000 years and strengthen it, you can enter the martial immortal stage after refining it. Then, you can use the sword soul to control the nomological power. Of course, normal people can't wait that long. But now, as long as Brother Fong refines it, you can immediately enter the mystic enlightening stage. Your understanding of sword Dao will also increase greatly." Fong Chi Shao's eyes lit up. "Good stuff. Brother Chu, you're really a good friend. You didn't have to bring anything when you came here. But since you're so generous, I won't stand on ceremony." "Shut up." Heavenly King Shen scolded Fong Chi Shao angrily. Then, he carefully said to Chu Xiu, "May I ask what Cult Master Chu wants 7th Young Master to do?" Heavenly King Shen was a veteran in the pugilistic world. He was a utilitarian. Anyway, in his opinion, since Chu Xiu had given Fong Chi Shao such an expensive item, the task he was assigned to do must be extremely dangerous. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Sect Leader Shen, don't worry. Brother Fong is a good friend of mine for so many years. Of course, I won't harm him. I just want him to do me a favor." "How much does Sect Leader Shen know about the Daluotian people?" Heavenly King Shen was puzzled. "The Daluotian that people from the lower realm went to 10,000 years ago? Everything I know is from the information you spread, Cult Master Chu." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and told Heavenly King Shen about his experiences in the Daluotian. At the same time, he wanted to tell Fong Chi Shao and Long Long. After listening to him, everyone's jaws dropped. Their faces were filled with shock. After that, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The people I offended in the Daluotian may not be as strong as me. But if they work together, it will be very troublesome. The reason I came to look for the Holy Lady and Brother Fong is very simple. Didn't I kill their disciple? Fine, I'll return one of their disciples now. Simply put, I'm looking for you to be spies." To Chu Xiu, there was actually no need to hide these things. Cracks had already appeared on the Heavenly Gate seal. The speed at which the chi of heaven and earth was dissipating was also increasing. There was no reaction from the Daluotian side. They were probably maintaining a vigilant attitude and did not try to destroy the array formation. Therefore, as time passed, it would not be long before the array formation broke. When that happened, the upper and lower realms would be connected, and everyone would know everything. Chu Xiu had already taken the initiative. Naturally, there was no need for him to continue sneaking around and hiding. Chu Xiu's words had a huge impact on the 3 people present. Heavenly King Shen took a long time to digest this information. At that moment, he suddenly felt a sense of sympathy for the various sects in the pugilistic world. They were still on guard against Chu Xiu in the lower realm, carefully calculating whether the Kunlun devil cult would harm their interests. But in the end, he was already fighting in another world and had already achieved great results. How pitiful were the sects in the lower realm. They only knew what Chu Xiu wanted to tell them, such as the secrets of the Heavenly Gate. And the things that Chu Xiu did not want to tell them, such as what was in front of them, no matter how scheming they would not be able to predict these things. Heavenly King Shen let out a long sigh. After digesting this information, he asked Fong Chi Shao, 7th Young Master, "Are you willing to follow Cult Master Chu to the Daluotian?" Fong Chi Shao did not even think before nodding. Of course I'm going. It's so fun." "No, it's so challenging. How can I not be part of it?" Seeing Fong Chi Shao's expression, Chu Xiu could not help but smile and shake his head. "Sect Master Shin, Brother Fong's ambition does not lie here. It's useless for you to force him to study those methods of managing a sect." Heavenly King Shen said helplessly, "Do you think I want him to learn these things? But he's the next leader of Sword King City. If he can't even learn these basic things, how can he be the sect master?" Chu Xiu shook his head. Sect Master Shin, you're wrong. It's precisely because these are the most basic things that Brother Fong is not willing to learn. As the leader of the Kunlun Devil cult, I have more things to do, even involving the upper and lower realms. But I'm either outside or in seclusion most of the time. Naturally, there are people who are good at these things to take care of for me. As for me, as long as I can guarantee their absolute reliability and loyalty, that's enough. The pugilistic world is very complicated, but the world of martial artists is very pure. Brother Fong is a pure swordsman. Since that's the case, then don't let him waste his time on other things. As long as he focuses on the sword Dao, that's enough. Heavenly King Shin glanced at Fong Qishao, who was looking around with a wretched expression. He did not believe that this fellow was a pure person. Moreover, he had watched him grow up. How was this fellow pure? But Chu Xiu's words made sense. This was the supreme figure of the world, the devil cult's leader, Chu Xiu. Of course, Heavenly King Shen had to take his words seriously. After bidding farewell, Chu Xiu left with Fong Qishao and Long Longer. After they left, Heavenly King Shen immediately rushed back to gather the Sword King City's martial artists for a discussion. As for what the discussion was about, of course, it was about the upcoming arrival of the Daluotian martial artists. This was nothing to Chu Xiu, but to the martial artists of the lower realm, it was enough to cause an earthquake. Logically speaking, that group of ancient martial artists should be their ancestors. But the problem was that they had not seen each other for 10,000 years. More accurately speaking, 10,000 years ago, they were the ones who had abandoned them. This was no small grudge. When they really descended to the lower realm, would they live in harmony? Dream on. Therefore, the Sword King City had to be prepared now. If the Daluotian martial artists really descended to the lower realm, the Sword King City had to think about what kind of attitude they should use to treat them. Meanwhile, on Chu Xiu's side, after leaving the Sword King City, Fong Qishao patted his chest and said, "I finally escaped. Brother Chu, you saved my life. If I had stayed any longer, I'm afraid I would have suffocated to death." Sect Master Shin is a person who plans ahead. He is thinking too much. He also hopes that you can successfully take over the Sword King City. Chu Xiu enlightened them and led them back to the South Man Branch Palace. At the same time, he explained some of the Daluotian common sense and rules to them. After bringing Fong Qishao and Long Longer back to the Daluotian, the two of them also looked around in amazement. After all, Long Longer was the moon-worshipping church's saintess. She had some knowledge. At least, she wasn't like Fong Qishao, who acted like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. After bringing these two people, Chu Xiu looked for Luo Feiheng, who was still in the lower realm. During the attack on the Heavenly Gate, Luo Feiheng also participated in the attack with a hull. Later, she found a cultivation method in the Heavenly Gate and began to cultivate in the Heavenly Gate. Luo Feiheng pushed the door open and said, "Great Sect Master Chu is very busy. How did you find the time to look for me?" After seeing that Fong Qishao and Long Longer were also in the room, Luo Feiheng was surprised and said, "Why did you also bring them? Is this the reunion of the Longhu list?" Chu Xiu asked curiously, "How do you know she is the moon-worshipping church's saintess?" Chu Xiu remembered that the moon-worshipping church's saintess had never shown her true face in the Jianghu. Luo Feiheng shouldn't have seen her either. Luo Feiheng shrugged and said, "You don't understand a woman's intuition. I think women are often more accurate than men." Chu Xiu coughed and said, "I called you here because I want you to be a spy and infiltrate the disciples of the Prime Venerables. I heard that you obtained the Taoist body-tempering secret technique Tai mysterious art in the Heavenly Gate. In addition, your strength foundation has been tempered very well. You can become a disciple of the dragon-subduing divine general Su Tinya. On the other hand, Long Longer, you cultivate various demonic arts and secret techniques of the moon-worshipping church. Although the principles are different, the nature is very flexible and very compatible with Venerable Gu Yu's cultivation method. You can become a disciple of Venerable Gu Yu's faction." Seventh young Master Fong, who was at the side, rushed to answer, "In that case, I should become a disciple of Sword Venerable Ling Tian?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No, I want you to become a disciple of the world's sword sections. Fang Qishao was stunned. Why am I different from them? Infiltrating a sect is much more difficult than infiltrating an ancient sovereign expert, okay? Chu Xiu said, Dragon subduing divine general and venerable Gu Yu work together. It's very difficult to meet two disciples who meet their requirements at the same time, so it's easier to infiltrate. On the other hand, venerable Ling Tian, Xing Juyuan, is very picky and stubborn. I heard that he's not very satisfied with Yuan Fu. Otherwise, Yuan Fu wouldn't have rushed to participate in the Daluo Divine Palace contest. Chu Xiu paused for a moment and deliberated his tone before saying, There's naturally no problem with your strength and talent. In fact, there aren't many sword Dao experts in the absolute heaven's younger generation who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you. But your personality, it's easy to clash with Xing Juyuan. I'm afraid that even if I send you to Xing Juyuan's side, he might not accept you, so it's safer to send you to the world sword sections. Fang Qishao's eyes widened. What did this mean? Was she looking down on him? Chapter 1319. Of course, Chu Xiu did not despise Fang Qishao. Although he did despise Xing Juyuan a little, sending Fang Qishao to Xing Juyuan's place felt a little irresponsible to Fang Qishao. Although Chu Xiu could feel Xing Juyuan's anger and killing intent when Xing Juyuan came looking for trouble, it was not strong. At least, it was not as strong as Su Tianya's. Xing Juyuan gave Chu Xiu the impression that Xing Juyuan had not lost his disciple, but that he had lost face. Hence, he had come looking for Chu Xiu to take revenge and regain his face. It was obvious that to him, his face was far more important than his disciple. Chu Xiu patted Fang Qishao's shoulder and said, You're a man. It's normal for your task to be harder than those two women. Do you really have the nerve to compare yourself to them? Fang Qishao glanced at Long Longer and Luo Feiheng. He really wanted to say that he had the nerve to do so. He casually waved his hand and said, Never mind, I'll just treat it as helping you this once. Long Longer said, But how are you going to place us among those two prime sovereigns and the world sword master? It's not a good thing when a pie falls from the sky. Even if those two are prime sovereigns who spend most of their time cultivating in the mountains and forests and lack the ability to scheme, they shouldn't be so careless. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, You don't have to worry about that. I'll handle it. I've been in the Dalu Ocean for so long. If I can't even handle such a small matter, won't I, Chu Xiu, be a waste of my reputation? Chu Xiu arranged for Fang Qishao to refine the sword soul and also told them some details about the Dalu Ocean, while he went to find someone to set up this matter. As for the person, Chu Xiu had already made up his mind. It would be the Divine Machinations sect master, Sikong Tan. It was Sikong Tan, who had once joined hands with Yuan Fu to kill him, but had fled with his tail between his legs in the end. In the exalted Divine Palace, the other party had been lucky enough to survive, and he had also left with ease. Chu Xiu knew all of this. However, Chu Xiu did not find trouble with him. First, it was a matter of vision. With Chu Xiu's current strength and status, it wasn't worth it for him to cause trouble for a sect leader of a small sect. Also, Chu Xiu really didn't have the time to find trouble with a small fry like him. At that time, Chu Xiu was still busy attacking the heavenly gates. But now, it was time for him to make use of him. The Southern Region's Divine Machinations sect. Ever since returning from the exalted Divine Palace, Sikong Tan had been in a daze, like a bird startled by the mere twang of a bow. The other cultivators of the Divine Machinations sect had no idea what had happened to their sect master. Had he been frightened by the demonic ghost in the exalted Divine Palace? Sikong Tan had been frightened, but not by the demonic ghost. Instead, he had been frightened by Chu Xiu. When he had joined hands with Yuan Fu to besiege Chu Xiu, Chu Xiu's invincible stance had already completely scared Sikong Tan out of his wits. He wasn't the type of martial artist that was filled with battle intent. Later, he learned that Chu Xiu had killed Exen Jiahua and stepped into the martial immortal realm in the exalted Divine Palace. That had terrified him even more. When he recalled that he had participated in the siege against Chu Xiu, Sikong Tan felt his insides tremble. After waiting for several months, he didn't see Chu Xiu come looking for trouble. Only then did Sikong Tan breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed that after Chu Xiu stepped into the martial immortal realm, his horizons and bearing had improved. He likely wouldn't bother with Sikong Tan over such matters. That was why Sikong Tan had breathed a sigh of relief recently. At that moment, Sikong Tan had changed into a new set of golden robes. He was preparing to leave for the Profound Heart Palace's sect master's disciple acceptance ceremony. Although Sikong Tan's Divine Machinations sect wasn't very powerful in the southern region, he had a wide network of friends. He was a man of wealth and power. Thus, every sect would come looking for him if they had any matters. In the past, Sikong Tan had been very nervous and had declined many invitations. Now that he could relax, it was time for him to manage his connections. After instructing the other disciples to guard the sect, Sikong Tan left alone. The Profound Heart Palace wasn't far from his Divine Machinations sect. It would only take him a day to go there and back. Thus, there was no need for him to bring so many people with him. Just as Sikong Tan was halfway there, passing by a small forest path, a voice suddenly came from behind him. "Sikong Tan, do you still recognize me?" Sikong Tan's complexion instantly changed. His entire body started trembling like a sieve. How could he not recognize this voice? Previously, when he had nightmares, it was this voice that resounded in his head. He originally thought that the other party had already let him go. Yet, the other party appeared when he was most relaxed. That instantly caused Sikong Tan to collapse. In the next instant, Sikong Tan came back to his senses. With a putting sound, he directly knelt on the ground and cried bitterly, begging for mercy, "Official Chu, spare me. Back then, I was blinded by lard and joined hands with Yuan Fu to deal with you. Actually, I also didn't want to, but Yuan Fu used his identity as sword-exalted Ling Tian's successor to threaten me. I was also forced into a corner. Official Chu, I have elders to take care of, children to take care of, and a group of Divine Machinations sect disciples to take care of. Please let me go this once." Sikong Tan suddenly playing such a trick on him made Chu Xiu dumbfounded. From the lower realm to the Daluotian, he had seen many martial artists. Being strong did not mean that one's methods were strong, nor did it mean that one's mental state was firm. But once one reached the heaven and earth profound opening realm, one could be considered an expert who could establish a sect in the Daluotian. In the lower realm, one could even stand at the peak. Of the enemies who had died by his hands, some had fought him to the bitter end, some had cursed him, and some had even run away. But Sikong Tan was the only one who had lowered his voice and begged for mercy. This guy could be considered a weirdo. With his actions, Chu Xiu had wanted to say something, but he could only swallow back the words that he had prepared. After reorganizing his words, Chu Xiu said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you. If I wanted to kill you, you wouldn't be alive now." Hearing Chu Xiu say that he wouldn't kill him, Sikong Tan heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly crawled up. However, Chu Xiu then said, "But I can spare you. You can be spared from death, but you cannot be spared from punishment. Help me do something. If you succeed, the grudges between us will be written off. If you fail..." Before Chu Xiu could finish, Sikong Tan interrupted, "As long as Official Chu spare me this time, I will definitely follow Official Chu at your beck and call, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Not to mention one thing, even if you ask me to do 100 things, this subordinate can still help you." Although Sikong Tan was a coward who was afraid of death, his brain worked very quickly. In just a few sentences, he had become a subordinate, as if he himself was Chu Xiu's man. Chu Xiu nodded and said in a low voice, "The task I will give you is very simple. It is to fabricate a reasonable identity for two unidentified people and make them appear in front of Su Tianya and Fang Baidu in a very coincidental manner. Then, they will accept them as disciples." Sikong Tan was shocked when he heard this. He wasn't an idiot. Of course, he knew why Chu Xiu was doing this. Just as Sikong Tan was about to say something, Chu Xiu said coldly, "Don't tell me that you can't do this. In the Southern Territory, although your Divine Machine sect isn't the strongest, you are the most involved. You sell weapons and spell formations in exchange for information. Sikong Tan, you are smooth and slick and have friendly relations with all the major sects in the Southern Territory. If you can't do this, no one else can. I know this is difficult, but your life should be more valuable than this, right, Sikong Tan? Now, I only have one question for you. Can you do this? Sikong Tan immediately swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He nodded vigorously and said, yes. Chu Xiu nodded in satisfaction and said to the inner demon in his mind, divide a bit of power into his mind and monitor him. The inner demon immediately shouted, Chu Xiu, you are too much. Time and time again. Are you really treating me as a consumable? I haven't even reconstructed my body, and you have already divided all my power. Don't worry. My research on the demonic path of creation has deepened. I will help you reconstruct your body very soon. When you have a real body, you can cultivate like a human. You can make up for all the power you lost. Although the inner demon had been tricked by Chu Xiu more than once or twice, the chance to truly become a human was in Chu Xiu's hands. He could only agree. Chu Xiu waved his hand and imprinted a bit of the inner demon's power into Sikong Tan's mind. He said indifferently, I will leave a bit of restriction on you for monitoring purposes. But don't worry. As long as you are obedient and help me complete this task, I will naturally remove this restriction for you. Sikong Tan smiled bitterly and said, don't worry, Lord. I will do my best to help you complete this task. Exchanging an opportunity for his life was something that Sikong Tan couldn't do even if he wanted to. A month later, in the Southern Territory's dense forest, Sikong Tan was carefully explaining their identities to Luo Feiheng and Long Ling. The two of you must remember that you are the orphans of the Southern Territory's 1,000-mile county's grazing horse villa. After the grazing horse villa was destroyed by the Qilin bandits, you wandered the world and accidentally obtained the inheritance of two deceased prime sovereigns. You have cultivated all the way until now and have come back for revenge. If anyone asks about your identities, you only need to remember that you are the children of the grazing horse villa's 27th head, Luo Fei, and the 32nd head, Long Wanli. You can just say that you are too young to remember anything else. Luo Feiheng sized up Sikong Tan and said, I say, fatty, are you reliable or not? Why do I feel that your plan is a bit perfunctory? Sikong Tan was only slightly chubby, and he hated people calling him fatty the most. But knowing the identities of the two in front of him, Sikong Tan could only helplessly explain, Miss Luo, please don't worry. How could I dare to be perfunctory with the task that official Chu has given me? In the past, the grazing horse villa had 72 heads. Luo Fei and Long Wanli did exist, but their presence was very low. Now, almost everyone who knew them is dead, let alone anyone who knew their daughters. Also, it doesn't matter if this information is true or false. Official Chu only needs the two ladies to become the disciples of the two prime sovereigns. As long as they believe it, it will be considered a success. Chapter 1320. Sikong Tan had built up such a family business from scratch, so he had some ability. Otherwise, Chu Xiu would not have chosen him. He was a minor character in the southern region, but it was precisely because of this minor character that he had such a thorough understanding of the entire southern region. It was also because of this minor character that he tried his best to curry favor with these powerful primogenitors. He knew Sword Venerable Ling Tian and even Su Tianya and the others far better than Chu Xiu did. At this time, Su Tianya and Fang Baidu were preparing to return to the southern barbarian jungle where they cultivated in seclusion, but the expressions on their faces were not good. Fang Baidu sighed. If we had known that Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong would have such a calamity in their lives, we would not have agreed to let them go to the Exalted Divine Palace. Now that both of them have died in the Exalted Divine Palace, where are we going to find two more suitable successors? Su Tianya also rubbed his head. If you don't know, then I don't know either. It's all those damned big sects' fault. 90% of the Daluotian martial artists have been recruited by them, leaving us very few. Fang Baidu rubbed his chin and said, why don't we go to those small sects or independent cultivators and take a look? There might be some fish that slipped through the net. Su Tianya shook his head. The probability is not high. Whether it's those martial artists from small sects or independent cultivators, if they can show good talent, they will either be cultivated as the head of a family or have long entered a big sect. How can we have a chance to pick up the leftovers? The two looked at each other and sighed at the same time. The requirements for primogenitors to accept disciples were so strict purely because they did not have the ability to select a large number of disciples like those big sects and then select the best successor from among the large number of disciples. They only had one chance, and they could only put all their energy and resources on one person. Now that they were given another chance, although they were not old and had a certain amount of energy, the problem was, where was the person? At this moment, Fang Baidu suddenly glanced in one direction. Su Tianya was puzzled. What's wrong? There are people fighting over there. It seems to be a battle of extermination. Su Tianya thought for a while and said, that seems to be the Phoenix Mountain. An abandoned disciple of the war-fighting divine sect gathered a bunch of villains and bandits to build a mountain stronghold. I think they are called the Qilin Bandits or something. Anyway, they are just a bunch of mobs. The Battle Martial God sect is the same. The Qilin pirates have been raiding and robbing around here, and they even dared to rob some small sections. They've killed countless people, and their reputation is extremely bad, but they don't care about them. Aren't they afraid of losing face? Fang Baidu said in a low voice. Ever since the war-fighting sect became a large sect in the southern region, they have become more and more unscrupulous in their conduct. In the past, they still valued their reputation a little, but now they don't care about it at all. Let's go and see who's doing this. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya flew into the air with the mentality of watching a good show. When they arrived at the top of the Phoenix Mountain to take a look, the scene was somewhat beyond their expectations. This was indeed a battle of extermination, but the ones who did it were two women. One of the women looked delicate and charming, but her attacks were nimble and ruthless. All kinds of secret arts and demonic skills emerged one after another, making it impossible to defend against them. The other woman, on the other hand, was the opposite. Although her strength was a little weaker, and she was only at the spiritual refinement realm with real fire, she was valiant and heroic, and her combat strength was amazing. She held a blood-red spear in her hand, and as she flew up and down, she pierced and sent all the martial artists in front of her flying. A woman wielding a spear actually displayed an indomitable momentum like that of thousands of troops and horses. She had mastered the essence of spear techniques. Fang Baidu suddenly said, of these two people, one of them should be practicing the cultivation method of the devil path, but her attacks are nimble and elegant, which is the essence of our Guyu lineage. As for the other woman, her spear technique is already rare and outstanding among warriors of the same rank. Most importantly, I can see that she should be cultivating in a Taoist lineage of body-refining mysterious technique. The body-refining cultivation method of your divine dragon-subduing general lineage should also be inclined to the Taoist lineage, right? Hearing Fang Baidu's words, Su Tianya finally realized that these two people could be said to be suitable to be their disciples. Moreover, of these two people, one was at the mystic illuminating realm, and the other was at the spiritual refinement realm with real fire. They already had a good martial arts foundation. As long as they were trained well, they would be able to catch up to the dead Su Jiang and Chen Jiolong in a short time. However, Fang Baidu said again, but we still need to investigate the identities of these two women. We have just lost our disciples, and now they have appeared. This is too much of a coincidence. Su Tianya's eyes lit up. Coincidence? You are just thinking too much. A suitable disciple just happened to appear, and you actually think it's a coincidence. This is an opportunity, okay? Fang Baidu still wanted to say something, but he suddenly saw Sikong Tan, who was standing on the other side of Qilin Mountain. Hey, isn't this the fat Sikong Tan of the Divine Machine sect? Why is he here? Sikong Tan was slick in his dealings. Fang Baidu and Su Tianya were both primeval sovereigns of the southern region, so he had naturally communicated with them before. Of course, it was more appropriate to say that he was currying favor with them. That fat man is the most well-informed in the southern region. Let's go and ask him. At this moment, Sikong Tan was also waiting there, pretending to be calm. He deliberately stood there to let Fang Baidu and Su Yu see him. Chu Xiu had instructed him to complete this task. Sikong Tan thought for a long time and decided that the safest way was to loosen the reins only to grasp them better. He wanted them to take the initiative to accept them as disciples, instead of sending them in himself. Therefore, in addition to Luo Feiheng and Long Longa, someone else had to come forward and explain everything. This person was the most suitable. Seeing that Fang Baidu and Su Tianya were indeed attracted by him, Sikong Tan immediately put on a look of pleasant surprise and went forward to ask, "Greetings, Venerable Gu Yu and Divine General Dragon Subduing. What brings the two of you here?" Su Tianya did not waste time with him. He pointed at Mount One Finger and asked, "Do you recognize the two women on the mountain?" "Who are they?" Sikong Tan sighed and said, "Of course I recognize them. I was the one who sold them the information about how they destroyed the Qilin bandits. In fact, they are also a pair of pitiful people. Their fathers were the 27th head of the Grazing Horse Villa, Luo Fei, and the 32nd head of the Grazing Horse Villa, Long Wanli. After the Grazing Horse Villa was destroyed by the Qilin bandits, they wandered the martial world. However, because they accidentally obtained the relics of two primeval venerables, their strength and cultivation improved greatly. This time, they came back to buy the information from me to take revenge. However, these two girls have no savings except for the inheritance they accidentally obtained. Even the money they used to buy the information was on credit. However, I am a kind-hearted person. Seeing that they have been through so many hardships, I decided to provide them with the information first and pay them later." Sikong Tan forcibly suppressed the nervousness in his heart and nagged for a long time. Su Tianya and Fang Baidu did not doubt him. They looked at each other and nodded lightly at the same time. There were so many primeval venerables who had passed down their legacies since ancient times. Many of them had lost their legacies and had no inheritors. It was normal for these two girls to obtain the relics left behind by such primeval venerables. Moreover, Sikong Tan's words were reasonable. They had never thought that this slick person in the southern region, who was also famous for being timid, would dare to lie to them. After a long while, Long Ling and Luo Feiheng walked down with a murderous aura and threw a pile of secret boxes to Sikong Tan. "Fatty, this is your reward. It's more than what you promised." Sikong Tan beamed and said, "Thank you, ladies. In the future, if you need to buy any information or even elixirs, weapons, formation materials, and so on, you can come to the Divine Machine Gate to look for me." At this time, Su Tianya suddenly said, "You two girls are quite talented. Unfortunately, you never had a good teacher to guide you. If you continue to cultivate recklessly, you may reach your peak now. It's not easy to break through the barrier between heaven and man. The two of us cherish talents and want to take you two as our disciples. As long as you are willing to acknowledge us as your masters, the resources and cultivation methods of our two branches will all be yours. I can even guarantee that with your talents, I can help you break through the barrier within 20 years. Luo Feiheng curled her lips and said, "Who are you? You want to accept disciples just because you say so. Do we look like people who lack a master?" Long Linga, on the other hand, pulled Luo Feiheng and said cautiously, "Seniors, please forgive us. We sisters have been traveling in Jianghu and depend on each other for survival. Until now, we have no intention of acknowledging a master." Sikong Tan hurriedly slapped his thigh and said, "Oh, do you know who these two seniors are? They are primeval venerables. This is the famous dragon-suppressing divine general, Su Tianya, and the other is Venerable Gu Yu Fang Baidu. There are many people in the martial world who want to be their disciples, but these two seniors don't even think of them. It's your good fortune to be chosen by these two seniors." Su Tianya didn't say anything, but he still smiled proudly. In the martial world, the identity of Venerable Gu naturally had a high status. Although it couldn't be compared to the leader of a real big sect, at least it wouldn't be degraded, especially for some rogue martial artists. However, Long Ling still put on a cautious look and said, "We appreciate the kindness of the two seniors, but we really don't need to acknowledge you as our master." If Long Ling and Luo Fei Hung were ecstatic and wanted to acknowledge them as their masters, they might not be used to it. However, the more the two of them refused, the more they wanted to take each other as their disciples. Fang Baidu coughed and said, "Ladies, I know how you feel. Youths are full of ups and downs. After wandering in the martial world for a long time, it's inevitable that you will be wary of everyone. But we are different. You know who we are? To put it bluntly, we are both martial immortals. If we have any ill intentions towards you, do you have the ability to resist? On the contrary, as long as you acknowledge us as your masters, you won't have to worry about anyone harboring ill intentions towards you. At the very least, you won't have to go through what you experienced when you were youths again." Hearing this, Long Ling and Luo Fei Hung were a little moved. With Xikong Tan adding fuel to the fire, the two finally looked at each other and bowed to Fang Baidu and Su Tianya. "Greetings, Master." Fang Baidu and Su Tianya looked at each other, and a hint of a smile appeared in their eyes. But they didn't notice that when Long Ling and Luo Fei Hung looked at each other, there was also an unfathomable smile in their eyes. Chapter 1321. Southern Region, Under the Heaven Sword Sect, Heavenly Sword Peak. Fang Qi Shao faced the sun as he climbed step by step towards the peak of Heavenly Sword Peak. As he climbed, he mumbled something. "Prioritizing a lover over a friend is inhumane. I hope you won't be able to find a wife for the rest of your life." The person Fang Qishao was cursing was Chu Xiu. At this moment, Fang Qishao's face was filled with resentment and he was in a bad mood. He felt that he had been tricked. He knew about Luo Fei Hung and Long Long. Chu Xiu found Xikong Tan. His identity, experience, everything was arranged properly. Xikong Tan even took the initiative to cooperate with them to infiltrate the enemy's base. What about him, Fang Qishao? Chu Xiu patted his shoulder and threw him a sentence: "Act according to the situation." Under the Heaven Sword Sect was strict in accepting disciples. Even if Chu Xiu found Xikong Tan, it would be useless. With Xikong Tan's level, he wouldn't be able to reach under the Heaven Sword Sect. Therefore, the arrangement that Chu Xiu gave to Fang Qishao was to let him challenge Heavenly Sword Peak and become one of the 13 Sword Peak Masters of Under the Heaven Sword Sect. Under the Heaven Sword Sect was known as Under the Heavens, which meant that it encompassed the Sword Tao of the world. Therefore, among the 13 Sword Peaks of Under the Heaven Sword Sect, there was a common people's Sword Peak which was prepared for the Under the Heavens Sword experts. The Common People's Sword Peak opened once every 10 years. All the martial artists in the pugilistic world, no matter if you were a wandering martial artist or a martial artist from a small sect or a small family, as long as you could pass the test, you could enter the Common People's Sword Peak and become a disciple of Under the Heavens Sword Sect. Coincidentally, during this period of time, the Common People's Sword Peak opened. Therefore, Chu Xiu let Fang Qishao challenge the Common People's Sword Peak openly. In the words of Chu Xiu, "You, Fang Qishao, were the chief swordsman in the lower realm, and you will still be the chief swordsman in the Daluotian world. How could those loose cultivators compare to you, Fang Qishao? The Common People's Sword Peak Master has to be you. No schemes can compare to true strength." At that time, Fang Qishao was beaming with joy when he was fooled by Chu Xiu. He casually asked Xikong Tan for a fake identity of a rogue cultivator and came to the sword sect of the world. However, when he arrived here, he felt that he seemed to have been fooled by Chu Xiu. To enter Common People's Sword Peak, the first hurdle was to climb to the top of the heaven-reaching Sword Peak. This place restricted all internal strength and true qi. One could only rely on their physical strength and willpower to climb up step by step. Although this was not a difficult task for the 7th young Master Fang, it was very tiring. There were some martial artists who were climbing up too. However, those with weak foundations and willpower were eliminated one after another. After finally reaching the peak with great difficulty, 7th young Master Fang finally saw the upper echelons of the world's sword sections. Sword Venerable Luo Shan, Sword Venerable Azure Dawn, Mu Baishuang, and the newly promoted Sword Venerable Nine Nether, Iguatia. Even Sword Venerable Ling Tian, Sheng Jiyuan, was watching from the high platform. Sheng Jiyuan had a close relationship with the sword sect of the world. In such a grand occasion, Sheng Jiyuan came to observe the ceremony and also to help the sword sect of the world. Luo Shan looked at the martial artists present and said solemnly, "Although the sword sect of the world is said to have the sword path of the world, we don't dare to say that we are perfect. The sword Dao lineage was endless. The sword of the predecessors might not be strong. The sword of the later generations might not be weak. Today, we will open the common people's sword peak and choose a peak master. Everyone, let this old man see what sort of shocking sword Dao has been born in this world. Let the sword arena begin." Along with Luo Shan's words, on the square at the peak of the heavenly sword peak, long swords with runes carved on them rose from the ground, giving off sword energy that shot into the clouds. This was the sword arena of the world's sword sect. It was made up of tens of thousands of long swords, and each of the previous swords was a famous swordsman of the 13 sword peaks of the world sword sect. All the sword cultivators present jumped onto those long swords and started to fight. The so-called common people's sword peak selection wasn't to choose the first but to choose the swordsman who met the requirements of the sword sect of the world. Your strength could not be at the peak, but you had to bring out enough sword path and sword path talent for the sword sect of the world sword sect to pay attention to you. Fang Qi Shao carried the shocking centipede sword in his hand and slowly stepped onto the sword arena. The other swordsmen on the sword arena were extremely nervous. Only Fang Qi Shao was leisurely, like he was here to watch a show. He didn't know that his appearance attracted a lot of hatred. In an instant, a few swordsmen stared at him and attacked him. Fang Qi Shao sighed, "It is just an arena, why are you risking your life? I don't want you to fight to the death. Do you think that the sword path is just a crude way of killing? TSK, shallow." When the few swordsmen heard Fang Qi Shao's nagging, they all looked like they had eaten a fly and they hollered, "Shut up." As they said that, the sword energy in their hands became stronger. It was obvious that they wanted to kick this annoying fellow out. But in the next moment, a blinding sword light had already appeared in front of everyone. The sword light wasn't very beautiful, but it swam between the many sword energies like it had passed through time and space. The swords in the hands of the other few swordsmen were involuntarily attracted to the sword light. It was as if they were actively trying to hit the sword light. Moreover, when one person's sword aura hit the sword light, an intense sword energy fluctuation exploded out. But coincidentally, it triggered the sword aura of the martial artist around him, and instantly it started to explode. It was as if this circle of people had planned this beforehand. A series of sword auras exploded and their strength multiplied. They actually sent the circle of people who attacked Fang Qi Shao flying. This scene instantly attracted the attention of the others. But before they could react, Sword Saint Luo Shan, who was sitting on the main seat, suddenly said, "Stop. There is no need to fight. You are the peak head of common people's sword peak." Everyone looked towards where his hand was pointing. Luo Shan was pointing at Fang Qi Shao. At that moment, all the swordsmen who were participating in the common people's sword peak selection were stunned. What was going on? This fellow just used one sword and he became the peak head of common people's sword peak? Was it a joke? Everyone felt a little unhappy, but Luo Shan didn't care about them. He just heaved a sigh. It is the cause and effect sword technique. The world's sword sects included 99% of the sword techniques in the world. Naturally, Luo Shan recognized the cause and effect sword technique. But after so many years, to be able to comprehend the cause and effect sword technique to such a level at such an age was extremely rare. There shouldn't be anyone like that. Moreover, in Fang Qi Shao's sword technique, there was something that belonged to him. Sheng Jun, who was at the side, suddenly said, "Sect leader, how about giving this person to me? My sword Saint Ling Tian's lineage owes the world's sword sects a promise." Luo Shan squinted his eyes and said, "You can't teach this person. His sword technique has already taken shape. As long as he steps into martial celestial, it won't be weaker than your lineage's sword technique. If you take him in, you will be destroying him and you." Before Sheng Jiyuan could say anything, Luo Shan waved at Fang Qi Shao and called him over. He asked, "May I know your name and background?" Fang Qishao shrugged his shoulders and said, Southern Region Sword Technique Loose Cultivator Fang Qishao. My family is dead and my master is also dead. I am so poor that I can't even afford to go to a brothel. I can only come to the World's Sword Sect to try my luck. Speaking of which, the World's Sword Sect is such a big sect. You don't have to spend money to go to a brothel, right? Previously, Chu Xiu didn't ask Fang Qishao to act. He only told him to perform according to his character. Although they were enemies, Chu Xiu had to admit the World's Sword Sect's purity towards the sword technique. As long as Fang Qishao displayed his sword technique cultivation, the World's Sword Sect would definitely not reject him. However, Chu Xiu didn't expect that Fang Qishao didn't hide at all and just let himself go. The other martial art practitioners of the World's Sword Sect frowned. Luo Shan also didn't say anything for a long time. Xing Jiyuan, who was at the side, even closed his eyes. Luckily, he didn't really take Fang Qishao as his disciple. Otherwise, he might not be able to stop himself from strangling him to death. Letting out a long breath, Luo Shan said in a deep voice, With your strength, it is enough for you to establish a sect in the Daluotian. You also have your own understanding of the sword technique. Therefore, I only have one question for you. What do you think is the sword technique? Fang Qishao asked in surprise. The sword technique is the sword technique. What else can it be? Why do you always like to complicate simple things? Luo Shan was stunned. Then he laughed and said, That's right. The sword technique is the sword technique. What else can it be? You are not bad. From today onwards, you are the peak master of the mortal life sword peak of the World's Sword Sect. When Fang Qishao heard that, he didn't look happy. After all, he was a man who could already become the master of the Sword King City. No matter how strong the World's Sword Sect was, a peak master wouldn't make him feel flattered. Therefore, Fang Qishao only asked seriously, After becoming a peak master, I can visit a brothel? No. Before Fang Qishao could finish his words, Mu Baishuang interrupted him sternly. Mu Baishuang said expressionlessly, You have entered the World's Sword Sect. You represent the face of the World's Sword Sect. The World's Sword Sect has strict rules. If you really dare to visit a brothel and not pay, the World's Sword Sect will have 72 types of sword technique punishments waiting for you. Fang Qishao shrugged and said, If you can't, then you can't. Why are you so fierce? Such a big sect can't even visit a brothel with your face. That's not much. When these words came out, the faces of all the World's Sword Sect martial artists darkened. The reputation of the World's Sword Sect, the pinnacle of the Daluotian sword path, is it for you to visit a brothel without paying? If this guy in front of them wasn't the peak master of the mortal life sword peak personally appointed by Luo Shan, they couldn't wait to teach him a lesson. Luo Shan rubbed his head and said to Mu Baishuang, Take him away and teach him the rules of the World's Sword Sect. When Fang Qishao was taken away by Mu Baishuang, Xing Jiyun suddenly said to Luo Shan, Thank you, Sect Master. Luo Shan nodded helplessly and sighed. It's fate. A few days later, in the Kangwu prefecture of the southern barbarians, Chu Xiu also received the news. Chu Xiu was not surprised that Luo Feiheng and Long Longer could sneak under the two prime sovereigns. The two of them were strong and capable, and with Sikong Tan's arrangements, it was almost in the bag. But after listening to Fang Qishao's performance in the sword arena, Chu Xiu wiped off his cold sweat. He wanted the seventh young master Fang to act as himself. He wanted the seventh young master Fang to act as a genius swordsman, the seventh young master Fang to act as himself, and not as a clown. But he actually asked if he could use the name of the World's Sword Sect to visit a brothel for free. If it wasn't for the shocking sword talent he displayed, the people of the World's Sword Sect would definitely kill this guy who humiliated the World's Sword Sect on the spot. Chapter 1322. After successfully infiltrating Fang Qishao and the others into the enemy's territory, Chu Xiu's side could be considered to be at peace. However, Chu Xiu also had a feeling that his intelligence in the Daluotian was too little. Apart from being well informed in the East region, He had no source of intelligence in the other 3 regions. Of course, this was not Chu Xiu's fault, but the Daluotian's 4 regions were severely divided, which was how it was originally. The reason why Sky Devil Palace could plant spies in the world's sword sects was that they were originally sects in the South region. However, if Sky Devil Palace wanted to plant spies in the East region or the further West or North region, the difficulty could be said to have risen sharply. However, as it happened, Chu Xiu had offended many people all over the 4 regions, so he urgently needed the intelligence of the entire 4 regions. He also wanted to investigate some things in the Daluotian, so Chu Xiu had his eyes on Sikong Tan again. This time, Chu Xiu did not go to the South region, but used the power of the Heart Demon to call Sikong Tan to the East region. When he walked into Chu Xiu's stronghold in the southern barbaric land, Sikong Tan suddenly felt a chill while he was perturbed. What did he see? The strict and orderly hall was filled with array formations. He also knew array formations, but even he couldn't see through the array formations here. The people coming and going were all martial artists dressed in black with cold expressions. Sikong Tan could feel a dense murderous aura from them, which was definitely not something that could be developed from 1 or 2 massacres. Although Sikong Tan was from the southern region, he had dealt with the martial artists of the Imperial Sky Pavilion before. He was sure that the martial artists of the Imperial Sky Pavilion were definitely not like this. This Chu Xiu was in the Imperial Sky Pavilion's territory, but he did not stay in the prefectural governor's office. Instead, he built such a heavily guarded stronghold in the southern barbaric land. Moreover, the martial artists under him were also different from the martial artists of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. What exactly did he want? This was no different from making oneself a king. All this while, Sikong Tan had thought that Chu Xiu was backed by the Imperial Sky Pavilion. But now, it looked like Chu Xiu might only be backed by himself. Filled with apprehension, Sikong Tan carefully stepped into the hall. The lights were dim, and Chu Xiu's figure was hidden in the depths of the darkness. He suddenly said, "Sikong Tan, you've done well this time. Let's write off everything that happened in the exalted divine palace." Sikong Tan jumped in fright, but he immediately said, "Official Chu is too serious. It is this subordinate's honor to be able to work for Official Chu." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I am a person who rewards and punishes clearly. If I don't give you any benefits when you work for me, who will be willing to work for you in the long run? Sikong Tan, you've done well this time, so I won't give you a reward. However, if you do well in what I'm about to ask of you, I can give you far more than you can get by trying to curry favor with those so-called prime sovereigns." With a wave of his hand, Chu Xiu threw out a secret box. "Take a look at what's in here." Puzzled, Sikong Tan opened the box, only to be dazzled by the dazzling contents. Weapons, pills, cultivation methods, materials, and so on were innumerable. Sikong Tan had only taken a cursory glance at the cultivation methods, and he could tell that some of them were secret techniques that had been lost in the great overarching heaven. "My lord, what are you doing?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "These things are for you to develop the divine armament sect. You're quite capable, but the divine armament sect is inherently weak. It'll be too difficult for you to expand. Consider these things as an advance payment for you. Once the divine armament sect has expanded, you will only have one task, and that is to monitor the southern region, and even the northern and western regions for any news and movements. Also, I need you to help me find something." Sikong Tan hurriedly said, "Please tell me, my lord. No matter what it is, this subordinate will definitely find it for my lord." "Origin." Sikong Tan was taken aback. What? His dumbfounded expression wasn't an act, but he really didn't know what an origin was. In truth, Chu Xiu had already expected this reaction. Given Sikong Tan's realm, it was possible that he really didn't know what an origin was. Among the 5 realms, apart from the mysterious longevity heaven, there should be 8 origins existing in the world. Among the demonic origins, Chu Xiu controlled the demonic origins of descend to the mortal realm, while Dugu Weiwei controlled the demonic origins of Yellow Springs Heaven and Daluotian, while the demonic origins of ascended to the mortal realm were nowhere to be found. It was unknown whether it had dissipated during the Great Ancient Calamity, or whether it had been brought to the Daluocean. Among the Yang extreme origins, Chu Xiu controlled the Yang extreme origins of descend to the mortal realm, while the Daluocean and descend to the mortal realm's Yang extreme origins were nowhere to be found. As for Yellow Springs Heaven, Chu Xiu guessed that there might not be any Yang extreme origins there, and even if there was, it should have been obtained by Dugu Weiwei. Therefore, right now, Chu Xiu had the Yin and Yang essence, while Dugu Weiwei had at least 2 devil essence. At a glance, they could be considered evenly matched. However, the more of these things, the better. Thus, when they were in the lower realm, Chu Xiu had already ordered everyone in the Kunlun Devil Cult, as well as Wind Sweeping Tower, to search for clues related to the origin. On the Daluocean side, Chu Xiu chose Sikong Tan to investigate. Of course, this was just a test. He didn't really expect Sikong Tan to find the source for him. Origin energy was not something that could be investigated openly. Thus, Chu Xiu pondered for a moment and said, "You can understand the existence of origin energy as a natural treasure. It has both yin and yang, but it cannot be replicated." Its main body was a very unremarkable wisp of devil chi, or a wisp of golden light, but it contained extremely powerful power. Currently, among the Daluocean people, only the experts standing at the peak know about the existence of the origin. Therefore, you don't need to search for it on a grand scale. You just need to follow these characteristics and clues to track it down. This kind of thing can be done slowly. There's no need to rush. Sikong Tan memorized all of these characteristics and promptly said, "Yes, this subordinate will remember." At this moment, Mei Qinglian suddenly walked in and handed Chu Xiu an invitation card. She said, "Someone gave this to you and entrusted the Imperial Sky Pavilion to pass it to you. An invitation for the Ancient Venerables Conference? A primordial ultimate god?" There were only a few words on the invitation card. It was an invitation for the Ancient Venerables Conference and was signed by a primordial ultimate god. However, each word on the invitation card contained an extremely powerful power as though it was written with the laws of heaven and earth. It was extremely strange and could not be replicated. What is the Ancient Venerables Conference? Who is a primordial ultimate god? Chu Xiu mumbled. Sikong Tan subconsciously said, "The Ancient Venerables Conferences." However, as soon as the words left his mouth, Sikong Tan felt something was wrong. Wasn't Chu Xiu the Ancient Venerables' successor? Why didn't he know about the Ancient Venerables Conference? Why didn't he know about the Ancient Venerables Conference? Sikong Tan had carefully investigated Chu Xiu after returning from the Daluo Divine Palace because he was afraid of Chu Xiu. At that time, he felt that Chu Xiu's actions did not seem like something an Ancient Venerables' successor would do. He developed his forces in a high-profile manner and had no interest in being a hermit cultivator. Instead, he dominated the Jianghu. Moreover, although he claimed to be the Ancient Venerables' successor, no one knew which lineage he belonged to. Even the Ancient Venerables behind him had only made a move once to stop Yi Weikong of Cold River City. However, no one had seen his face that time. Thinking of Chu Xiu's unfamiliarity with the Ancient Venerables today, Sikong Tan couldn't help but have a bold guess, one that made him shudder. Sikong Tan subconsciously looked up and saw Chu Xiu looking at him with an indecipherable look in his eyes. "You've guessed it?" Sikong Tan shuddered violently and shook his head. This subordinate is slow-witted. This subordinate doesn't know anything. Chu Xiu casually waved his hand. "Don't worry, since you're already one of my people, it's better to know than to be clueless about some things. At least you know who you're working for. Now tell me, who are the primordial ultimate gods and the primordial ultimate gods in this Ancient Venerables Conference?" Sikong Tan carefully said, "I heard this from Yuan Fu. He said that although the Ancient Venerables seemed to be hermit cultivators and rarely contacted each other, they each had their own connections and would communicate with each other. They broke away from the sects of the Jianghu and formed their own system. The Ancient Venerables Conference is a place where all the Ancient Venerables are connected. The date of the Ancient Venerables Conference is not fixed. It could be a decade, a few decades, or even 100 years. In short, The Ancient Venerables Conference is usually held when something big is about to happen. Apart from discussing matters, people can also exchange some things during the Ancient Venerables Conference. As for the Primordial Ultimate Gods Conference, this person is not well known in the Jianghu, but he is a peak 9th heaven martial immortal peak prime god. He is also the most low-key among the Ancient Venerables and has not stepped into the Jianghu for hundreds of years. The only time he has shown his face is during the Ancient Venerables Conference. The Ancient Venerables Conference always has an organizer. The Primordial Ultimate God is highly respected and has never fought with others. Therefore, he has been the organizer for hundreds of years. Chu Xiu nodded and asked, "Where is the Ancient Venerables Conference held?" "At the peak of the East Sea, the Immortal Island." Chu Xiu waved his hand and dismissed Sikong Tan. Sikong Tan immediately left as if he had been pardoned. Mei Qinglian suddenly frowned and said, "This is troublesome. Are you going or not? If you don't go, it will arouse suspicion." Chu Xiu said, "Of course I'm going. Among the Daluotian people, the top sects are a circle, and so are these Ancient Venerables. Only those who have become martial immortals are qualified to step into this circle and decide the direction of the Daluotian people. If I don't blend in, I will always be an outsider. How can I know so much? But if you choose to go, who can you let go? Old Man Wei? Although Old Man Wei is a martial immortal, he is not as strong as you." Chu Xiu pointed to himself and said, "Why should I let Old Man Wei go? Don't forget that the invitation was sent to the Ancient Venerables. I have already stepped into the martial immortal realm and become the new generation's Ancient Venerables. My master retired and gave up his position. Is that not enough?" Mei Qinglian only realized after hearing Chu Xiu's words. With Chu Xiu's current strength, he no longer needed to pretend to be the Ancient Venerable's successor. He could already become a real Ancient Venerables. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.